Chapter 3784. Let you try. Peng Fei's somewhat unconfident voice made Ji Tianxing frown. Now that the two armies are facing each other, the decisive battle is about to start. Moreover, everyone on the battlefield is a God King powerhouse. If you don't have the confidence, then don't take the risk. Although Ji Tianxing wanted Peng Fei to help him take care of Forefather Golden Rock, this powerful enemy, without using force, he did not want to force Peng Fei to do so. However, he didn't want to force Peng Fei to do this in order to avoid bringing disaster to Peng Fei. At most, he would go all out and use all his trump cards and ultimate skills to fight the two great peak god kings. However, after Peng Fei was silent for a moment, he said in a low and complicated tone, "I should still have 60 to 70% confidence. After all, I'm a direct descendant of the forefather. According to seniority, he's my grandfather's great-grandfather." Without a doubt, now that things had developed to this extent, Peng Fei finally revealed the truth. This was his identity secret. It had never been exposed before. Ji Tianxing was also full of surprise. He said with a light smile, I already guessed that you shouldn't be an ordinary Golden Rock descendant. I didn't expect it to be so. In that case, the Golden Rock race's current patriarch is your grandfather? Peng Fei's emotions were somewhat complicated. He answered in a muffled voice. It was unknown what he was worried about. Ji Tianxing comforted him. Don't worry too much. I have some relationship with your forefather. He already protected me in front of everyone just now. However, just protecting him a little is not enough. I have to remove him from this matter. Now it's up to your performance. Finishing, he opened the spatial passage to the divine pagoda. Peng Fei's thoughts were still somewhat chaotic. Before he could adjust his mood and state, he was sent into the sky and exposed to everyone's attention. Zhou. Peng Fei, dressed in a golden robe, appeared beside Ji Tianxing with a bitter and complicated expression. He instantly became everyone's focus. King War Dragon, Forefather Golden Rock, and Divine King War Whale all stared at Ji Tianxing. More than 10,000 people on the battlefield were also waiting for his decision to surrender or resist. But right at this moment, a golden-robed young man suddenly appeared beside him. Many people originally thought that this was Ji Tianxing's trump card, and that it was definitely a peak God King powerhouse. When everyone saw through that Peng Fei only had peak Divine Lord strength, their faces were immediately full of astonishment. What's going on? What does he mean? Who is that golden-robed youth? Why do I feel that the golden-robed kid's appearance and temperament are a little similar to Patriarch Golden Rock? What does Long Tian want? Do you want to fight or surrender? Give me a quick answer. Many god kings and thousands of god lords looked at Ji Tianxing and Peng Fei in confusion. Only Emperor Battle Dragon, Forefather Golden Ping, Divine Emperor Battle Whale, Xianxia, and the others realized something was amiss. This was especially true for Patriarch Golden Rock. Although he appeared calm on the surface, he had already understood something. He frowned slightly and looked meaningfully at Peng Fei. Then he stared at Ji Tianxing and sent a voice transmission. Little guy, you're a little shameless. You're not as arrogant as before. Ji Tianxing bowed slightly and sent a voice transmission back. Senior, I had no choice. Please forgive me. Patriarch Golden Rock didn't say anything else, but he sighed in his heart. He felt a little bitter. He had already guessed what Peng Fei wanted to do, so he felt helpless. At this moment, Emperor Battle Dragon and Divine Emperor Battle Whale looked at Peng Fei and then at Patriarch Golden Rock. Their eyes flickered as they vaguely guessed something. Divine Emperor Battle Whale was still calm, but Emperor Battle Dragon's eyes were already showing anger. Just as the experts were speaking in riddles and maintaining their silence, while the 10,000 Overseer gods were confused, Peng Fei finally spoke. He had also been shocked by such a huge lineup, but he quickly calmed down. He ignored the 10,000 god lords and only stared at Patriarch Golden Rock as he walked over step by step. There was no doubt that 10,000 pairs of eyes were staring at him. Their gazes were filled with doubt, disdain, hatred, and all sorts of other emotions. It made him feel extremely pressured. With every step he took, he felt as if he was walking on a mountain that was tens of thousands of meters tall. After a dozen steps, he was drenched in cold sweat. Even so, he gritted his teeth and walked slowly toward Patriarch Golden Rock. The distance between the two of them was clearly only 100,000 feet, but he had to walk for a full quarter of an hour before arriving. When he stopped in front of Patriarch Golden Rock, he was only 10 steps away. Emperor Battle Dragon and Divine Emperor Battle Whale's invisible aura had already made him tremble. His face was pale. Fortunately, Patriarch Golden Rock secretly released his aura to protect him, helping him to resist the pressure of the two top experts. Disciple Peng Fei greets Patriarch. Peng Fei knelt down solemnly and kowtowed to Patriarch Golden Rock. His posture was extremely respectful. Patriarch Golden Rock looked at him deeply. There was no anger or disappointment in his eyes. Instead, there was a flash of relief. After all, this great-great-grandson of his was only a god lord, but he was able to remain calm in such a situation without losing his composure. It was clear that he was very determined. Yes, he was a talent with potential. He had a successor. What is it? Patriarch Golden Rock nodded slightly and used invisible divine power to help Peng Fei stand up. He asked calmly. Peng Fei bowed and said calmly, Patriarch, a senior once taught me that everything has its ups and downs and that everything has its ups and downs. Heaven and earth have its Tao and life and death are all reincarnations. You live in seclusion and only ask the will of the heavens, not the mundane world. Therefore you leave the affairs of the world to the people of the world. I only wish to accompany you home and continue to listen to the will of the heavens. It was a simple sentence, but it explained the cycle of life and death in the mundane world, as well as the merciless principle of reincarnation. Divine Emperor Battle Whale narrowed his eyes and looked deeply at Peng Fei. Battle Dragon King's expression changed drastically, and he glared sharply at Peng Fei. All of this fell into Patriarch Golden Rock's eyes. Patriarch Golden Rock nodded and glanced at Zhou Xian. He frowned and thought for a moment, then suddenly smiled. Haha. The senior you speak of is indeed a great power who has not appeared in the world. He can already understand the will of the heavens, and is likely not far from surpassing the Divine King realm. That senior has seen through everything, and it is this old man who has fallen into a disadvantage. Forget it. This old man is not of the world to begin with, so why should I care about the affairs of the world? The first sentence was directed at Peng Fei, but the last two sentences sounded like he was talking to himself. When he finished, Patriarch Golden Rock smiled in relief. He flung his sleeves and left with Peng Fei. Battle Dragon King and Divine Emperor Battle Whale were left to the side without even a word of explanation. This scene made more than 10,000 people in the field dumbfounded. They were all stunned on the spot. He's gone just like that? Of course, no one knew what Patriarch Golden Rock's true thoughts were, or how much of what he said was true. Or perhaps he left without an explanation because he didn't know how to. But all of this, who could prove it? Chapter 3785. Forefather Golden Rock. Wait. Seeing that Forefather Golden Rock had already flown thousands of miles away, Battle Dragon King finally regained his senses and hurriedly chased after him. Forefather Golden Rock paused in midair with Peng Fei and turned to look at Battle Dragon King. Battle Whale, Shueshang, Ji Tianxing, Hu Xinyue, and the others all remained where they were, watching them from afar. Everyone knew that Battle Dragon King had finally found a life-saving straw, a trump card to turn the tables. How could he give it up so easily? However, the crux of the matter was what Battle Dragon King had to say. Battle Dragon King stopped in front of Forefather Golden Rock and frowned. Forefather Golden Rock, I know that you've been in seclusion focused on cultivating your divine Tao. However, the world is in chaos now, and the traitors of the Myriad Demon Alliance want to wreak havoc on the continent. Since you've already come to Xuanji Grotto Heaven, you should kill these traitors for the sake of His Majesty Dragon Emperor. However, you've just left without a proper explanation. You're not giving His Majesty Dragon Emperor any face. I hope you won't be blinded by these traitors and uphold justice for the world. Although Forefather Golden Rock was a peak divine king, he had always kept a low profile and his personality was honest and gentle. Battle Dragon King had Xuanji Grotto Heaven as his backer, and his status was noble, so he did not have much respect for Forefather Golden Rock. With such accusations, there was even a hidden threat in his words. His meaning was simple. Forefather Golden Rock had left today, but His Majesty Dragon Emperor would definitely punish him when he returned. 9 Mystical Grotto Heaven would definitely suffer. At first, Forefather Golden Rock had felt guilty and guilty. Now that he saw the War Dragon King's unyielding attitude, the guilt in his heart disappeared without a trace. He bowed slightly to the Battle Dragon King and said calmly without any anger, Battle Dragon King, This old man didn't think it through and accepted your invitation to come here. Now that I've thought it through, I want to leave again. This is indeed this old man's fault. This old man apologizes to you. However, there are some things that I must clarify in front of everyone today. I've stayed away from worldly affairs for 20,000 years, not because I'm afraid of anyone, but because I've always admired the great Tao. I'm willing to come to the Enigma Grotto, not because I'm giving anyone face, but because I don't want to see the common people suffer. I want to use my meager strength to turn things around. But I've thought it through now. Everything in the world has a cycle of cause and effect. The heavenly Tao is fair, and it's absolutely not something that we can interfere with. As for the justice and the country that you speak of, other than the heavenly Tao, who else can represent justice in this world? Neither the Xuanji Grotto nor the Myriad Demon Alliance could represent them. Therefore, this old man has understood and decided to stay out of this matter and allow the will of the heavens to arrange it. I will not go against the will of the heavens. After saying that, the Golden Rock Ancestor calmly looked at the Battle Dragon King and asked, "Battle Dragon King, do you understand what I mean?" Everyone present, as long as they weren't idiots, understood. Patriarch Golden Rock just didn't want to meddle in other people's business. As for the talk about justice and the heavenly Tao, it was just to leave some face for everyone. The Enigma Grotto Heaven used to be the overlord of the Star Source continent, representing justice and the country. However, this did not mean that the Xuanji Grotto would always be the overlord, nor would it always be righteous. Everything in the world would rise and fall, and so would the rise and fall of a dynasty. If the Myriad Demon Alliance destroyed the Enigma Grotto and replaced it, then the Myriad Demon Alliance would be righteous in the country. On the other hand, if the Myriad Demon Alliance failed, then they would be rebels and the Enigma Grotto would still be the overlord. In short, the winner was king and the loser was in the wrong. Whoever won was right. This was the will of the heavens. No one could refute this kind of hooliganism. Moreover, it was easy to understand, and more than 10,000 people present agreed. However, War Dragon King was furious. He pointed at Golden Rock Grand Elder and shouted, "You, what a sharp tongue you have. How dare you distort the truth with your words? Very well, Patriarch Golden Rock. You must remember what you did today, and when His Majesty the Dragon Emperor returns, he will make you regret it." This was already a blatant threat. God King War Whale Zhou Xian and many other God Kings from the Enigma Grotto were anxious. "O Battle Dragon King, no matter how angry you are, you should hold it in. You can't fall out with the Golden Rock Ancestor. The Golden Rock Ancestor is obviously protecting the Myriad Demon Alliance in Long Tian, and you're threatening him to his face. If he's forced to help the Myriad Demon Alliance, won't we be doomed?" Similar thoughts flashed through the minds of everyone present. The Golden Rock Ancestor was not angry at all. He still looked kind and amiable. However, his slightly stooped body straightened up. His murky golden eyes became clear as he looked at the Battle Dragon King. He said in a dignified tone, "The Golden Rock tribe does not take the initiative to cause trouble, but we are not afraid of it either." After saying that, he ignored the Battle Dragon King and left with Peng Fei. Whoosh. Under everyone's gaze, the grandfather-grandson pair gradually disappeared into the distance. When they were hundreds of thousands of miles away, no one could see them, and not even divine consciousness could detect them. They were not far from the exit of the Enigma Grotto. At this moment, the grandfather-grandson pair saw a large group of figures flying in the sky from the direction of the exit. These figures were as fast as streaks of light. There were more than 30 of them, and they looked like a dark cloud. The Golden Rock Ancestor frowned slightly as he glanced at them. He could tell at a glance that they were all godly kings. When he saw their clothes, he realized that they were not from the Enigma Grotto. They seemed to be from the Myriad Demon Alliance. Only then did he relax. The godly kings naturally saw the Golden Rock Ancestor and Peng Fei. They were all on high alert and they gripped their divine weapons tightly. However, 2 of the 3 elders in the lead were injured 9th-layer godly kings. They were the left and right protectors. They sized up the Golden Rock Ancestor and Peng Fei, then said something to the godly kings behind them. As a result, the godly kings let down their guard and changed their direction slightly. They brushed past the Golden Rock Ancestor and Peng Fei. The 2 sides did not stop, nor did they communicate. Their figures quickly disappeared into the horizon. About half an hour later, the Golden Rock Ancestor and Peng Fei arrived at the exit of the Enigma Grotto. At this moment, they saw that the God Stone array near the exit had been destroyed. The area within 10,000 miles was in ruins. In the ruins they could vaguely see the corpses of the Golden Dragon Guards. There were 10 godly kings from the Myriad Demon Alliance and more than 600 godly monarchs guarding the exit. Peng Fei was taken aback when he saw this. Then he smiled in relief. He already had an answer in his heart. The outcome of this battle was already decided. The Myriad Demon Alliance was bound to win. When the Golden Rock Ancestor and Peng Fei approached the exit, the Myriad Demon Alliance experts guarding the exit immediately became alert. 6 godly kings led dozens of godly monarchs. They held divine weapons and surrounded them warily. Chapter 3786. Before the left and right protectors left, they had ordered them to guard the exit of Xuanji Grotto Heaven. They were not to let anyone enter or leave. If anyone from Xuanji Grotto Heaven approached, they were to kill them. However, Old Ancestor Golden Rock and Peng Fei approached him openly without any strange expressions. Their clothes were neat and tidy and there were no signs of battle. They did not seem to be from Xuanji Grotto Heaven. The godly kings could not make up their minds. They decided to ask about their identities first before attacking. Fortunately, Peng Fei was quick-witted. Seeing that everyone was on guard, he took the initiative to speak. Brothers from the Myriad Demon Alliance, I am Peng Fei, young Master Long Tian's friend. This person beside me is the Master of 9 Mystical Grotto Heaven, the forefather of our Golden Rock clan. We are friends, not enemies. Don't be nervous. Hearing his explanation, the godly kings secretly heaved a sigh of relief. They did not completely believe Peng Fei, but they relaxed and bowed with a smile. After bowing, the leading godly king said respectfully, "So it's Forefather Golden Rock and young Master Peng Fei. We have been disrespectful. Greetings, Forefather Golden Rock. Please forgive us, Senior. We have a mission and orders, so we need you to prove your identity. We will ask for instructions from our superiors." Forefather Golden Rock was still amiable. He did not say much. He only raised his hand and released a beam of golden light. Whoosh! The sacred golden light in his hand immediately condensed into the image of a golden-winged rock. It was lifelike and had unparalleled divine might. A powerful and sacred aura belonging to a peak godly king immediately spread out. Around Forefather Golden Rock, hundreds of Daoist rhymes and divine runes of law danced. It was terrifying. The leading middle-aged godly king was a 7th-degree godly king. He was naturally knowledgeable. Based on Forefather Golden Rock's move, he could confirm that Forefather Golden Rock was definitely a peak godly king. In the entire Starsource continent, the number of known peak godly kings could be counted on one hand. Without a doubt, even if this kind-looking golden-haired elder was not Forefather Golden Rock, he was an expert that the Myriad Demon Alliance did not want to offend. Thus, the middle-aged god king hurriedly bowed and apologized, and sent a message to the left and right protectors for instructions. Not long after, the left and right protectors sent a reply, ordering them to let them pass. The god kings did not dare to delay. After apologizing to Forefather Golden Rock, they hurriedly opened the exit. Old Ancestor Golden Rock nodded slightly and hurriedly left Xuanji Grotto with Peng Fei. Shua! With a flash of white light, Patriarch Golden Rock and Peng Fei appeared at the peak of Sky Crane Mountain, standing above the sea of clouds. There was not a single soul in the surrounding tens of thousands of miles. It was very quiet. Patriarch Golden Rock was not in a hurry to leave. He turned his head to look at Peng Fei beside him with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "Peng Fei, how did you get to know Long Tian?" Patriarch Golden Rock had always felt that this matter was very strange. Could this be the will of the heavens? Perhaps. Long Tian's scheming mind was deep, and he had long predicted today's situation, so he tried his best to get close to Peng Fei. Peng Fei was very smart. Looking at the ancestor's reaction, he guessed that the ancestor had some suspicions. Thus, he hurriedly recounted the process of him and Long Tian getting to know each other in detail. After hearing this, Patriarch Golden Rock was relieved and said with some emotion, "It seems that this is really the will of the heavens." Peng Fei also nodded in agreement and said with a smile, "What the ancestor did today is also in accordance with the will of the heavens. Our clan will definitely be blessed in the future." Patriarch Golden Rock raised his eyebrows and said with interest, "Oh? What do you mean?" Peng Fei did not hide and said with a smile, "Ancestor Long Tian once told me that he promised in the name of the Heavenly Dragon Emperor that if the Myriad Demon Alliance controls the Starsource continent, as long as the 9 Mystical Grotto does not rebel in the future, He will protect the 9 mystical grotto forever. Patriarch Golden Rock was stunned for a moment, and a trace of gentleness flashed in his eyes. On account of the Heavenly Dragon Emperor's kindness, he let the Myriad Demon Alliance off today. And Long Tian was grateful for this favor and also made a promise to the 9 mystical grotto. This was what it meant to return the favor. Compared to the arrogant War Dragon King who knew how much better he was. Then Patriarch Golden Rock smiled and said earnestly to Ping Fei, "You have to remember that it is important to be kind to others and form good karma. But if you want to be worry-free, you have to rely on yourself." Peng Fei hurriedly nodded and said with a smile, "I will remember the ancestors' teachings." Patriarch Golden Rock thought for a moment and said with a playful tone, "I am going to return to the 9 mystical grotto now. Do you want to go back with me or stay here and wait for Long Tian?" Peng Fei's eyes widened in surprise and disbelief. Originally he had planned to follow the ancestor back to the 9 mystical grotto today. Although he would lose his freedom and become a bird in a cage again, he was satisfied to be able to help Long Tian so much. But now the ancestor had guessed his thoughts and allowed him to not return to the 9 mystical grotto. This simply made him overjoyed and excited. "Ancestor, can I really not go back?" Peng Fei asked with a heart full of surprise. Patriarch Golden Rock smiled kindly and said calmly, "Actually, not long after you ran away from home I found out. You felt wronged in your heart or you wanted to change your illusion realm and cultivation method. These are all fine. I can understand, and I am also willing to see some of the disciples in the clan have their own thoughts and changes. Instead of blindly following the past and blindly believing in the experiences of the seniors, you lose your own considerations." Patriarch Golden Rock's tone was very kind and he even had a gratified smile. When Peng Fei heard this, it was as if there was a thunderclap in his head. He was stunned. He was stunned on the spot and only came back to his senses after a long time. His eyes were slightly red and he almost cried. Back then he had run away from home and almost betrayed the Golden Rock clan, but he was not punished by the clan. Not only was he not caught and brought back to the 9 mystical grotto for trial, the clan even used their connections to ask 2 godly king experts to secretly take care of him. He did not understand the reason and thought that the clan leader's grandfather had found his conscience and deliberately arranged this. Now he understood that the ancestor had paid attention to this matter and tacitly approved of his decision. "Ancestor, thank." Peng Fei endured the bitterness in his heart and was about to bow and thank the ancestor. Patriarch Golden Rock waved his hand and continued, "Don't blame your grandfather. He is the clan leader and shouldered the safety and future of 20,000 people. He has no choice. Also, don't belittle yourself and lose confidence. Cultivating the divine way is not something that can be determined in 100 or 1,000 years. Since ancient times, who knows how many godly king experts have been mediocre in the first half of their lives, only to shine in the end. Therefore, don't be concerned about your current strengths and weaknesses. You need to stick to your heart, learn to think and find the divine way that suits you." At this point, Patriarch Golden Rock put his hands behind his back and looked up at the sky. His voice was deep and distant. "I have always believed that every child is like a star in the sky. They all have their own shining light." Chapter 3787. Inside the Xuanji Grotto Heaven. Near the dilapidated Golden Dragon Mountain Range, more than 10,000 godlords were engaged in a fierce battle. After Patriarch Golden Rock left, the furious War Dragon King ordered the soldiers of the Xuanji Grotto Heaven to kill the Myriad Demon League. He was so anxious because he was afraid of Ji Tianqing's thoughts and methods. Originally they were in a good situation, but they didn't expect Ji Tianqing to come up with a disciple of the Golden Rock clan and trick the Golden Rock old ancestor away with just a few words. War Dragon King was anxious and angry that he had lost a strong ally. He was afraid that if he delayed any longer, Ji Tianqing wouldn't surrender and would use some tricks to trick God King Battle Whale. God King Battle Whale should be more loyal to the Xuanji Grotto Heaven than Patriarch Golden Rock. However, War Dragon King couldn't guarantee that God King Battle Whale wouldn't change his mind at such a critical moment. What if Ji Tianqing used some tricks to form an alliance with God King Battle Whale and split the world? That would be a tragedy for the Xuanji Grotto Heaven. To avoid any complications, War Dragon King decided to end the battle quickly. Therefore, more than 70 God Kings led more than 10,000 Divine Lords to attack the 6,000 members of the Myriad Demon League. Under War Dragon King's arrangement, God King Battle Whale fought the strongest member of the Myriad Demon League, acting leader Long Tian. He and Zhou Xian worked together to deal with the elders of the Myriad Demon League. A dozen Golden Dragon Guard commanders surrounded the Myriad Demon League's branch leaders and heavenly kings. The 16,000-plus Divine Lord experts from both sides were also divided into two battlefields and engaged in a fierce battle in the sky. Everyone knew that this was the final battle. The outcome of this battle would determine each other's fate and who would become the overlord of the Starsource continent. Would they reach the peak of glory and control the Starsource continent? Or would they be beaten into the dust and become the humiliating loser? It all depended on the outcome of this battle. Therefore, no one held back anymore. They used all their divine powers and ultimate skills and fought bravely. Endless light and shadows of divine spells filled the area within a radius of 50,000 miles, causing the entire area to be in chaos. Amidst the dazzling divine light, earth-shattering explosions erupted one after another, shaking the universe. Violent shockwaves that carried fragments of divine light, pieces of flesh, corpses, and the remains of divine artifacts swept across the battlefield and scattered in the ruins that stretched for tens of thousands of miles. Every minute and every second, many divine Lord Masters were killed. Their heads were separated from their bodies, their bones shattered, or they were turned into a rain of blood. Angry roars, hysterical shouts, and shrill screams could be heard all over the place. This battlefield had already transformed into the most ferocious and bloody battlefield. But what was most terrifying was not the battlefield of the Divine Lord experts, but the battlefield of the top experts. High up in the sky, Battle Dragon King and Zhou Xian had joined forces to fight Wuxia Ao Jinying, Bai Feng and the others. The shock waves from the battle tore the sky apart, revealing cracks in the void. The War Dragon King was heavily injured and weak. He was only in charge of assisting and protecting himself. The main attacker was naturally Blood Death. With the protection of the indestructible golden body, he attacked Wuxia Ao Jinying, Bai Feng, and the others aggressively and had the absolute advantage. Before Ancestral Patriarch Golden Rock and Supreme Being Battle Whale appeared, he was still a little hesitant and wavering. But after the two top divine kings appeared, he made up his mind and stood firm. So, at this moment he was extremely brave and domineering, beating Wuxia Bai Feng and the others badly. On the other side, 80,000 miles away from the battlefield, Ji Tianxing and Supreme Being Battle Whale were fighting fiercely high up in the sky. As the most powerful cultivators of both forces, they were of course the key to the outcome of this battle. Both of them did not hold back and used their full strength, using all kinds of trump cards and ultimate skills. The War Whale deity king revealed his true form, which was 100 miles long black war whale. His entire body was shrouded in icy blue light. It opened its mouth wide and spat out waves of divine light. The divine light transformed into thousands of divine light shadows and blasted towards Ji Tianxing. He also released invisible law divine runes and a weak Daoist rhyme to seal off a radius of 50,000 miles, suppressing Ji Tianxing. The so-called Daoist rhyme was the power of the heavenly way that a peak divine king could comprehend the heavenly way. The end of the cultivation of the divine way was to merge with the heavenly way, comprehend and control the power of the heavenly way. If a peak divine king could completely control the complete heavenly way law and the power of the heavenly way, he would surpass the divine king realm and take the final step to enter the God Emperor realm. A peak divine king who had mastered the Daoist rhyme had a natural advantage over a divine king like Ji Tianxing who had not mastered the Daoist rhyme. Fortunately, Supreme Being Battle Whale had only cultivated for a short time and had only been a peak divine king for a few hundred years. Compared to an old monster like Ancestral Patriarch Golden Rock, his Daoist rhyme was obviously much weaker. Even if his Daoist rhyme could suppress Ji Tianxing, it was not fatal and could not achieve the effect of crushing. After all, Ji Tianxing was also a peak divine king who had mastered the Daoist rhyme in his previous life. Back then, Kenshin's comprehension of the heavenly way was deeper than Supreme Being Battle Whale's. The Daoist rhyme that he had mastered was much thicker than Supreme Being Battle Whale's. Ji Tianxing had enough experience to know how to avoid Supreme Being Battle Whale's Daoist rhyme and weaken the suppression of the Daoist rhyme to the greatest extent. Moreover, he had the primordial chaos spell in his hands. Under his control, the primordial chaos spell transformed and reformed into a pitch-black armor that wrapped around his body and protected him firmly. The divine bell even released a majestic power of law to resist Supreme Being Battle Whale's suppression and sealed off the area within a radius of 50,000 miles. On this battlefield he was suppressed by Supreme Being Battle Whale and could not teleport. However, Supreme Being Battle Whale was also suppressed by the divine bell and could not use spatial transference. Therefore, the battle between the two of them was exceptionally fierce and desperate. It was almost a head-on clash that was difficult to dodge and avoid. Although Supreme Being Battle Whale was stronger and had mastered the Daoist rhyme, he did not have a Supreme Grade King Grade Divine artifact. On the other hand, Xianxia was slightly weaker, but he had a lot of experience and had the Primordial Chaos Bell. The two of them exchanged over 1,000 moves high up in the sky, but there was no clear victor. Each of them had their own merits. However, God King Warwol's mind was calm and collected. Xianxia, on the other hand, looked solemn and anxious. Supreme Being Battle Whale could stall for time, but he could not. He had to end the battle as soon as possible. This was because Xuanji Grotto Heaven had the upper hand and was suppressing the Myriad Demon Alliance. The number of people on both sides was decreasing, but the Myriad Demon Alliance's casualties were more severe. If they delayed for another hour, the Myriad Demon Alliance would definitely lose. At this point, Xuanji Grotto Heaven had more than 8,000 people left, while the Myriad Demon Alliance only had about 4,000 people left. From Hu Xinyue and Ao Jining to a few thousand divine lords, they were all filled with grief and despair. Fortunately, just as the two sides were fighting fiercely, a dark cloud flashing with divine light rushed over from afar and joined the battle. That dark cloud was formed by more than 30 Supreme Being experts. The three leading elders were the left and right protectors and the chief of internal affairs. The reinforcements of the Myriad Demon Alliance had finally arrived. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3788. The left and right protectors and the head of internal affairs, Fu Ergu, led more than 30 God King experts into the battlefield. Without needing anyone to give them orders, they split into two groups and joined the two teams from the Demon League. Although the number of reinforcements was small, there were only about 30 of them. But they were all God King experts and could fight against 100 people. When they joined the battle, the situation changed immediately. Divine light flashed across the sky. Divine light covered the sky and poured down on the people from the Xuanji Grotto. In less than 100 breaths, more than 1,000 monarch god experts died under the swords of the God King experts. The Demon League's army that was retreating immediately regained their footing and had a chance to catch their breath. The Xuanji Grotto's army that was in high spirits had their attacks stopped and their arrogance quickly weakened. The situation quickly became balanced and the two sides were evenly matched. Especially Hu Xinyue, Ao Jining and a few elders, they had been suppressed by Xianxia and War Dragon King and were on the verge of collapse and death. Now that the head of internal affairs had joined the battle, the pressure on them was greatly reduced. Everyone finally had a chance to catch their breath and quickly took the chance to consume some divine pills to suppress their injuries and recover their divine power. The head of internal affairs, Fu Ergu, had always kept a low profile and very few people had seen him fight. For the past few hundred years he had been in the Demon City, controlling the internal affairs of the Demon League and handling all kinds of important matters. There was a rumor in the Demon City that he was the second strongest expert in the Demon League and his strength was second only to League Master Luo Ho. He was stronger than the left and right protectors. But this rumor had not been confirmed and many people were skeptical. Until now, when everyone saw him fighting Xianxia and suppressing War Dragon King, they finally believed the rumor. Fu Ergu's super strong combat power was not that of an ordinary 9th Heaven Realm God King but an expert that was very close to the peak God King realm. If it was not for Xianxia's immortal golden body, he would not be Fu Ergu's opponent in his weakened state. Even so, Fu Ergu was still able to fight Xianxia to a draw and suppress War Dragon King, forcing him to retreat continuously. Therefore, the thousands of soldiers from the Demon League respected Fu Ergu even more. Everyone was more confident in the victory of this battle. Hu Xinyue and Ao Jining retreated to the edge of the battlefield. After consuming the divine pills, they circulated their energy and discussed with each other. Previously, when the two protectors said that our reinforcements had arrived, young master asked them to receive them. I didn't believe them. At that time I was still thinking that we were already at the end of our rope. Where would we find reinforcements? I didn't expect the reinforcements to be Sir. That's right. This is simply too unexpected, even we didn't expect it. But weren't Lord Steward and those consecrators hall masters and branch masters under orders to guard the headquarters of Myriad Demon City? Why would they leave the Demon City and come to the Xuanji Grotto to help? Of them. If they all left, wouldn't the current 1,000 Demon City be an empty city? That's of our demons of heaven's sects Irafas of Lords sect rain reinforcements of Lords. This rain reinforcements this Lord of Lord. Since it's young master's arrangement he must be confident. Ao Jining frowned and thought for a while. Then he smiled and nodded in agreement. That's right. Previously, Lord asked the head to guard the Demon League to prevent an attack from Xuanji Grotto, in case our headquarters is destroyed. But now we've entered Xuanji Grotto and destroyed the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's divine palace. I guess Xuanji Grotto doesn't have any more trump cards and forces to attack the Demon League. Since the Demon League is safe, of course the head and his colleagues have to come to Xuanji Grotto to help. Only then can our league win. It will take at least 2 to 3 days to reach Xuanji Grotto from the Demon League. In that case, young master had already predicted this outcome and informed Sir Supervisor in advance. So everything is within Lord's expectations. Lord's foresight is amazing. I'm impressed. Hu Xinyue and Ao Jining were both smart people. After a short discussion they guessed the whole story and understood the reason behind it. Because of this they admired and respected Ji Tianxing even more. After a while their injuries stabilized and their divine power recovered. They were about to return to the battlefield and attack Xianxia and the War Dragon King. But the head of internal affairs Fu Ergu ordered, "Don't come. Leave these two to me. You two go and help everyone kill the Xuanji Grotto soldiers as soon as possible." Hu Xinyue and Ao Jining thought for a while and quickly replied, "Yes, Lord." Then the two of them charged into the battlefield, killing the Golden Dragon guards and Sir God experts. They were well aware that the Chief of Internal Affairs' words were very reasonable. Even if they joined forces with the head of Internal Affairs to attack the War Dragon King and Xianxia, it would not be of much use. It would be better to let the head of Internal Affairs hold back the War Dragon King and Xianxia while they went to kill the Golden Dragon guards and Sir Gods of Xuanji Grotto. This would be more helpful to the battle. The facts proved that the Demon League strategy was correct. While the War Dragon King and Xianxia were held back by the head of Internal Affairs, the Demon League had more God Kings than the Xuanji Grotto. On the two battlefields, the Demon League quickly gained the upper hand and completely suppressed the Xuanji Grotto. As time passed, the Xuanji Grotto's God Kings dwindled and their Sir God experts were slaughtered. An hour later, the Xuanji Grotto's Sir God experts were only left with about 3,000. 2 hours later, the Xuanji Grotto's side was left with about 1,000 people and about 20 God Kings. On the other hand, the Demon League still had about 50 God Kings and 3,000 Sir God experts. Now that the situation had developed to this point, the Xuanji Grotto's defeat was inevitable. Moreover, the head of Internal Affairs had sacrificed 500 years of his cultivation to kill the War Dragon King despite being heavily injured. The Xuanji Grotto's top experts were only left with God King War Whale and Xianxia. Both of them were foreign aid and not the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's direct subordinates. Therefore, the Xuanji Grotto's people were like dragons without a leader and their morale plummeted. The thousands of Sir Gods and over 20 godly kings who were lucky enough to survive also lost their fighting spirit and drive. Many of them fought as they retreated, looking for an opportunity to escape. The left and right protectors Hu Xinyue and the others led the Demon League's 3,000 experts and decisively formed an encirclement, swearing to kill the enemy. Seeing this scene, Xianxia, who was already exhausted, gradually lost his fighting spirit. He stopped fighting the head of Internal Affairs and started to think about escaping. After all, the Xuanji Grotto's momentum was already gone. He was not the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's direct descendant, so there was no need for him to die with the Xuanji Grotto. Chapter 3789. Although God King War Whale and Ji Tianxing's battlefield was 80,000 miles away, the two had fought for almost 2 hours, but there was no clear victor. However, the two were secretly watching the battle between the thousands of soldiers and they were anxious. At the beginning, the Myriad Demon Alliance was at a disadvantage. Ji Tianxing was worried, but God King War Whale was calm. Later, the Minister of Internal Affairs brought more than 30 God Kings into the battlefield, and the situation began to change. Ji Tianxing's mental state became much more relaxed, while God King War Whale began to worry and worry. Now that the two saw the mystical grotto's army crumble, and the myriad demon alliance's people were attacking with all their might, their mentality changed again. Tianxing's heart calmed down. Aside from the fact that victory was within his grasp, he was still planning how to defeat deity King War Whale. After all, this was the first peak God King he had fought in his life. If he could not defeat him, it would be a pity. When God King War Whale saw the mystical grotto's army crumble, and even Xianxia began to flee, his expression dimmed. Of course, he could see that the mystical grotto's momentum was gone, and they were destined to lose today's battle. With his status, he did not need to be buried with the mystical grotto. However, others could disregard their image and flee, but he could not. After all, he was a peak God King, one of the strongest people on this continent. If he fled like Xianxia, wouldn't he lose face and become a laughingstock? How would he, a peak God King, have any dignity and glory? However, God King War Whale was even more aware that since the situation had developed to this point, he was powerless to reverse the situation. Therefore, he could only think silently. How could he withdraw from this battle without losing face? This was a difficult question. God King War Whale thought of many ways, but after some consideration he could only give up. He admitted that Long Tian was very strong, and there was no point in continuing the battle. Why not just return home and call it a day? This would weaken the momentum of a peak God King and make him look guilty and timid. Saying, "I suddenly remembered that I have something important to do, so I'll take my leave first?" That was too childish. Even a fool would not believe it. Moreover, this method of leaving was similar to running away in a sorry state. Was he supposed to say that the fate of the Xuanji Grotto was already decided? He wasn't a subordinate of the Xuanji Grotto, and he had already done his best. Since the situation is irreversible, I don't want to make a deadly enemy of the 10,000 Demon Alliance. If this news were to spread, it would definitely cause a huge uproar in the continent. At that time, not only would he be despised by everyone, but he would also offend the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor. This method was also undesirable. Divine King War Whale pondered for a moment, then suddenly remembered the excuse old ancestor Golden Rock used to leave. The Enigma Paradise used to be the ruler of this continent, but now it's going to fall at the hands of the Myriad Demon Alliance. Is this the will of the heavens? The heaven's will is truly unfathomable. This king possesses the will of heaven, so naturally I do not dare to go against heaven's will. Forget it, everything in the world is predestined. This king's retreat is also in accordance with the will of the heavens. As this thought flashed through his mind, God King War Whale's eyes lit up. He felt that this method was feasible. In any case, Patriarch Golden Rock had used this move before, so he did not feel that it was embarrassing. It should not be a problem for him to borrow it, right? However, after much consideration, God King War Whale decided to use this method as a backup plan. What he desired the most, what he thought was the most perfect and most reasonable plan, should be Long Tian taking the initiative to ask. God King War Whale. Look, the Enigma Paradise has lost and everyone has fled. Why haven't you retreated? Although the world knows that you're righteous and warm-hearted, and this king also admires you for being so righteous and powerful, there's no point in fighting. If we continue to fight, there's no point in us fighting. Why don't we stop fighting? Please leave the Enigma Paradise and stop interfering in this matter. Take it that the Myriad Demon Alliance owes you a favor. Long Tian looked at him with a sincere expression and spoke in a sincere tone. He even bowed to express his sincerity. Then he put on a pained and helpless expression, sighed a few times and reluctantly agreed. This was a reasonable and perfect solution. In fact, God King War Whale thought that even if the Myriad Demon Alliance did not owe him a favor, he would still agree. Unfortunately, things did not go as he wished. The reality was as follows. Seeing the Enigma Paradise's soldiers being defeated and Xianxia fleeing for his life, Long Tian smiled coldly. He was no longer worried and anxious. Instead, he focused on dealing with God King War Whale. Not only did he use his full strength, but he also used his trump card. Celestial Dragon Tyrant Body. Long Tian roared. Golden light flashed all over his body, and he suddenly turned into a giant in golden armor. Not only did his body become extremely large, but his combat strength also increased by 7 times. He was like a giant god. The primordial chaos bell flew high into the sky and quickly expanded to a radius of 30,000 miles. It covered the sky and covered the earth, suppressing God King War Whale. At the same time, Long Tian held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed out with a dazzling golden light that could split heaven and earth. Sword of Apocalypse. Without a doubt, this was Ji Tianqing's strongest state and strongest killing move. In order to defeat God King War Whale, he held nothing back. God King War Whale's expression changed. Under the suppression of the primordial chaos spell, his body bent, his strength weakened, and his speed slowed. He could not dodge the sword that could split heaven and earth slashed down. Boom. Crack. The sword of Apocalypse, tens of thousands of feet long, slashed through the Enigma Paradise's spatial barrier and tore open a huge spatial rift in the sky. Outside the spatial rift, one could clearly see the dark and cold void and the dense starlight. God King War Whale knew that he could not dodge the sword. If he took it head-on, he would definitely be injured. In this critical moment, he calmly made a decision. Swoosh. With a swipe of his huge tail, he tore open a spatial rift in the sky. Then he turned his head and passed through the spatial rift, entering the outer realm. This move seemed simple, but it required an extremely powerful divine power. One's control and understanding of divine Tao nomological laws had to be at an extremely high level as well. If one was not a peak god king, it was impossible to escape the primordial chaos spell's suppression. Once he entered the dark and cold void, God King War Whale felt the pressure decrease and his body became lighter. He did not stop. Like a fish in water, he flew into the depths of the void at the speed of light. As a peak god king, he often roamed the void. Therefore, there was no danger for him to escape into the outer realm. Boom. Crack. The sword of Apocalypse, tens of thousands of feet long, missed its target and slashed into the ground. Coincidentally, below was the peak of the Golden Dragon Mountain range. It was immediately slashed into a ravine, and half of the mountain range turned into ruins. A terrifying power of laws exploded, destroying everything within a radius of 50,000 miles, turning it into a dark void. The Enigma Paradise was shattered. Countless void storms and turbulence passed through the spatial rifts and surged into the Enigma Paradise, wreaking havoc. Chapter 3790. The dimensional barrier was broken and the dimensional turbulence and storms entered the Xuanji Grotto heaven. It was absolutely destructive. Hundreds of black hurricanes swept across the Xuanji Grotto heaven and quickly spread. Wherever the hurricane swept past, space would shatter, mountains, rivers, and other things would all turn into nothingness. In just a few breaths of time, the already dilapidated Golden Dragon Mountain range was completely destroyed. Not to mention the dilapidated hillsides and mounds of earth. Not even a few handfuls of yellow earth remained. Everything had turned into nothingness. The soldiers of the 10,000 Demon Alliance and the soldiers of the Xuanji Grotto heaven who were running away saw this with their own eyes. They were terrified and they sped up to escape. Unfortunately, the speed of the dimensional storms was much faster than those divine emperors. In less than 20 breaths, the rapidly expanding dimensional rifts and hundreds of dimensional storms would swallow the thousands of divine emperors. The terrifying dimensional storms would indiscriminately crush and swallow everything. Ji Tianqing originally wanted to chase into the dimensional rifts and kill Divine King War Whale. But when he saw this, he had to take out the chaotic primordial bell to stop the dimensional rifts and dimensional storms from spreading. He had no choice. The 3,000 soldiers of the 10,000 Demon Alliance had to be saved. Otherwise, even if the 10,000 Demon Alliance defeated the Xuanji Grotto heaven, they would be wiped out. In the end, the dominion of the Star Source continent would still be taken away by other forces. Swish. Under Ji Tianqing's control, the chaotic primordial bell quickly expanded and became 100,000 miles wide in the blink of an eye. Such a huge divine bell was equivalent to a sky canopy. The divine bell fell from the sky and not only covered the rapidly expanding dimensional rifts, but also the hundreds of dimensional storms. There were continuous sounds of bang 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 and rustling coming from the divine bell. The gigantic divine bell also trembled violently as it kept flashing with five-colored divine light. Apparently, the dimensional storms were attacking and cutting the divine bell. But the divine bell was an ancient divine weapon and it contained a hint of the Tao. It stopped the expanding dimensional rifts and suppressed the terrifying dimensional storms. The crisis of the Xuanji Grotto heaven was quickly resolved and the thousands of divine emperors who were running away were also out of danger. Everyone looked at the god clock in shock as if they had just survived a calamity. However, the calm only lasted for a few breaths. The left and right protectors Hu Xinyue, and the rest of them soon led the soldiers of the 10,000 Demon Alliance to encircle and annihilate the remaining survivors. The 1,000 or so remaining soldiers of the Xuanji Grotto were unable to put up any resistance. Soon they were completely defeated. 60% of them were Golden Dragon Guards. They were loyal to the Xuanji Grotto. Even if they knew they were going to die, they would fight until the very last moment. However, the remaining 40% of godly monarchs and a few godly kings were not from the Xuanji Grotto. Some came from sects and forces under the mysterious grotto, while others came from other realms. Knowing that they would definitely die if they resisted, these people lost their will to fight and simply surrendered. After all, their loyalty to the Xuanji Grotto was built on benefits. Since the Xuanji Grotto was powerful enough, they naturally had to show their loyalty. Now that the Xuanji Grotto was doomed to be destroyed, they had to find a way out for themselves. Thus the battle ended very quickly. After the soldiers of the 10,000 Demon Alliance killed more than 500 Gold Dragon Guards, they began to clean the battlefield and deal with the 400 captives. On the other side, Ji Tianxing used the primordial chaos spell to block the void storm. Then he chased into the void with his sword. After escaping into the void, God King War Whale charged into the depths of the void without looking back. However, after flying for tens of thousands of miles, he realized that Long Tian was not chasing after him. He could not help but use his divine consciousness to check. Seeing the void storm wreaking havoc in the Xuanji Grotto, he was relieved, because he knew that Long Tian would definitely stop the space from shattering and stop the raging void storm. First, Long Tian would not allow the 3,000 soldiers of the 10,000 Demon Alliance to be killed by the void storm. If that happened, the 10,000 Demon Alliance would be destroyed. Second, Long Tian would not allow the Xuanji Grotto to be destroyed. The 10,000 Demon Alliance still wanted to occupy the grotto and control the entire continent. Therefore, God King War Whale was certain that Long Tian would be killed by the void storm. His nervous heart immediately relaxed. However, just as he relaxed his nervous mood, his heart instantly rose again. This was because his divine consciousness had detected that Long Tian had already passed through the void rift and chased into the void with his sword. What was even more infuriating was that the moment that guy entered the void, it was as if he became a different person. He was even more like a fish in water than him. Whoosh. His speed actually doubled. Furthermore, he was incomparably adapted to the void's environment without any discomfort. Regardless of whether it was the terrifying cold air or the turbulence, traps and storms lurking in the darkness, he could avoid them all in advance. That feeling was like the void was his home. In just an instant, the distance between the two people closed from 100,000 miles to 50,000 miles. In another 10 breaths of time he would be caught by Long Tian. God King War Whale was shocked and enraged. He could not resist cursing in his heart. Despicable bastard. Actually unwilling to give up, swearing to have a showdown with this king? This king is not someone from the Xuanji Grotto. I just came to help out on account of our relationship. Now that things have come to this king already took the initiative to retreat. How can he be so insensible? If he really forced this king into a corner and fought it out with him until both sides suffered heavy losses, is this the result that he wants to see? The way God King War Whale saw it, top powerhouses were not just powerful, they also had to be shrewd enough, adept at weighing the pros and cons, proficient in scheming and scheming. If he were Long Tian, he definitely would not pursue under this sort of circumstances. As the saying went, leave a way out for a demon so that we can meet again in the future. Giving each other a way out today, they could still turn enemies into friends in the future. Wasn't this a skill that every big shot should master? Yet, encountering Long Tian this stubborn, it was also unlucky enough. While feeling gloomy in his heart was gloomy, God King War Whale still did not dare to lower his guard, flying with all his might. However, after the two people chased for several 100,000 miles, Ji Tianxing still caught up to him. Swoosh. Wielding the Sword of Burial of Heaven, Ji Tianxing used some kind of divine ability and actually teleported 1,000 miles in the void, blocking in front of God King War Whale. God King War Whale was immediately filled with shock, staring at Ji Tianxing with dumbfounded eyes and slack jaws. What kind of divine ability is this, to actually be able to teleport in the void? If not for the fact that he had some respect for the heavenly Tao in his heart, God King War Whale really wanted to curse out loud. Damned heavens, you cheated for this guy, right? There's no justice in this world. Ji Tianxing raised his brows, looked at God King War Whale and said in a playful tone, very curious? Do you want to learn? God King War Whale withdrew his war whale body, transforming into a 30-foot-tall human form, frowning and looking at him silently. He had a hunch that this was absolutely not something good. Indeed, Ji Tianxing said with a smile, a long time ago I had a companion, a blue kuan. I originally planned to raise it and make it my mount. But unfortunately it died in a great battle. And now I want to fulfill that dream. Although you're not a kuan, just a war whale, I can reluctantly accept it. Chapter 3791. God King War Whale was stunned. Anger began to build up on his face and his eyes turned cold. He didn't know how many years it had been, but this was the first time he heard that someone actually dared to say such words to his face. The creatures of the dragon realm were mostly beasts, ferocious beasts and divine beasts. Their concept was different from that of the divinity. They rarely thought of mounts or pets. For a powerful warrior like God King War Whale, being treated as a mount was a great insult. He glared at Ji Tianxing and said in a low and cold voice, Long Tian, do you really want to force me? I didn't step back because I was afraid of you. I just didn't want to die with Xuanji Grotto. I didn't want to become enemies with the Myriad Beast Alliance. If you insist on going your own way, don't blame me for not showing mercy. Even though godly Emperor Battle Whale was too ashamed to speak his mind in the Xuanji Wonderland, Qin Nan did not dare to speak his mind. But now that things had progressed to this point and only he and Ji Tianxing were in the void, that was all he could say. Ji Tianxing knew what God King War Whale was thinking and knew that he wasn't lying. But he wasn't going to back down, nor was he going to let God King War Whale go. Aha, then why didn't you think of this when you accepted God King War Dragon's invitation to help Xuanji Grotto? Isn't it too late to say this now? Then what do you want? God King War Whale frowned, killing intent surging in his eyes. Ji Tianxing's attitude was still unyielding. He sneered and said, everyone has to be responsible for their own actions and they should pay the price for their mistakes. As a powerful God King, don't tell me you don't understand this? God King War Whale's face darkened even more, but he still sneered confidently. Even so, you can't do anything to me, much less kill me. The two had fought for 2 hours and exchanged more than 10,000 blows. This was proven. Ji Tianxing didn't think so. That's right, I can't kill you. But I can severely injure you, teach you an unforgettable lesson and make you behave for a few decades. Now that the Myriad Demon Alliance had conquered the Xuanji Grotto, they would gradually take over the Star Source continent in the next few decades. During this period, the Myriad Demon Alliance had to guard against the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor's revenge and the Battle Whale God King's rebellion. Ji Tianxing did not want to see any accidents during the 10,000 Demon Alliance's unification of the Star Source continent. Therefore, he felt that severely injuring God King War Whale and forcing him to go into seclusion to recuperate for a few decades was the safest way. God King War Whale's expression darkened as he thought about it. When he realized this, he couldn't help but grow even more furious. Very good. Long Tian, you are indeed confident and arrogant. Then this king would like to see what other tricks and trump cards you have that you dare to boast so shamelessly. With that, God King War Whale took out a dark golden halberd that was 6 meters long. The long handle of the halberd was as thick as an arm. Its design was exquisite, simple and majestic. The halberd at the top was split into 3 halberds, each with a 2-edged blade that flickered with a faint blue divine light. This was God King War Whale's natal divine artifact, the sea-splitting halberd. Of course, this was only a high-grade king-grade divine artifact. God King War Whale's greatest regret was that he didn't have a single supreme-grade king-grade divine artifact. If not, he wouldn't be ranked last among the 4 peak God Kings of the Star Source continent. Dai Long Tian. God King War Whale roared with a murderous aura. He held the sea-splitting halberd with both hands and charged at Ji Tianxing domineeringly. His entire body emitted a faint blue divine light that condensed into a pair of huge wings. They could help him maneuver in the void and protect him at critical moments. With a wave of the sea-splitting halberd, blue light that covered the sky and shone with more than 200 types of laws and divine runes charged at Ji Tianxing. It was fortunate that they were fighting in the void. If they were fighting in the dragon realm, the sky would have been torn apart by the sharp blue blades. The spatial barrier of the dragon realm would not be able to withstand such powerful divine power. Ji Tianxing was enveloped by the blue light and suppressed by more than 200 types of laws and divine power. He felt his divine body stiffen, his divine power blocked, and his battle prowess was greatly reduced. Fortunately, his movements in the void were not restricted, and he had a natural advantage. Seeing the blue blades coming at him, he instantly retreated 100 miles to avoid the sharp blades. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed with all his might. Like a golden divine dragon, it charged at God King War Whale. Heavenly Dragon slash. The holy golden dragon that was tens of thousands of feet long bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it viciously tore apart the blue blades of light that filled the sky. Unfortunately, when the holy golden dragon shattered the sharp blades that filled the sky, its power was also exhausted. God King War Whale only swung his halberd and shattered the golden dragon. The two of them were evenly matched and neither of them had the upper hand. God King War Whale swung his halberd again and instantly shot out 96 icy blue light pillars that formed a formation and blasted at Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing countered in an orderly manner, slashing out more than 200 sword lights, clashing with War Whale Deity King. The divine powers that the two of them used collapsed again. Neither of them was injured. Ji Tianxing immediately used the 10 directional vanishing shadows, and his body split into 8, creating 7 clones. He and the 7 clones worked together to form the 8 extreme battle formation and surrounded God King War Whale, attacking fiercely. God King War Whale had seen the power of this divine power when they were fighting in the Xuanji Grotto Heaven, so he naturally did not dare to underestimate it. However, he did not panic and quickly took out 9 calming divine pearls, which circled around him. Each of the 9 calming divine pearls was a superior grade king-level divine artifact. They could form an array to form a shield and release the power of a divine array to kill enemies. Under the protection of the 9 divine pearls, God King War Whale was like a tiger that had grown wings. He could deal with Ji Tianxing and the 7 clones more easily. Both sides engaged in a fierce battle in the sky, exchanging blows back and forth. Every single move was extremely exquisite and possessed extraordinary might. The aftermath of the two of them fighting was like ripples that spread in all directions, creating layers of ripples in the vast void. Unfortunately, there was no audience for this marvelous battle. If there were other God King experts present here, they would surely be dazzled and fascinated by this scene, and they would be filled with admiration. After all, this was a battle between the top experts of the Starsource continent and even the entire Dragon Realm. Many divine lords and divine kings might not be able to see it with their own eyes in their entire lives. Not to mention the dazzling light of the divine arts when the two of them were fighting, it was very enjoyable to watch. Just their understanding of divine powers, laws and techniques were enough for many divine kings to learn and comprehend. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. Soon 10 hours had passed. Ji Tianxing and God King War Whale exchanged 100,000 moves and both of them had used up almost half of their divine power, but they were still evenly matched. Both of them were slightly injured but neither of them had the upper hand. God King War Whale gradually lost his patience and wanted to mock Ji Tianxing before thinking of a way to retreat. However, he did not expect the primordial chaos bell to fly over from afar and join the battle. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3792. Ji Tianxing's strength was not enough to make God King War Whale wary. What he was truly wary of was the primordial chaos bell. When he was escaping from abstruse grotto heaven, God King War Whale used his consciousness to detect that Ji Tianxing had left the divine bell in abstruse grotto heaven to block the spatial rifts and void storms. Therefore, even if Ji Tianxing caught up to him and swore to defeat him, he was not worried. But it was different now. Under the suppression of the primordial chaos bell, the spatial rifts and void storms in abstruse grotto heaven rapidly weakened. Under the restoration of the heavenly Tao laws, the spatial rifts quickly closed. Abstruse grotto heaven's spatial barrier had been restored, and the primordial chaos bell's mission was completed. It actually returned to Ji Tianxing's hands. He was like a tiger that had grown wings and his combat strength increased greatly. God King Warwell's expression changed immediately, and he made up his mind to escape. Without the divine bell's help, Ji Tianxing could fight him to a draw. Now that Ji Tianxing had the divine bell, he was definitely no match for him. Swoosh. God King War Whale exchanged a blow with Ji Tianxing, and used the powerful impact to escape into the depths of the void. His speed was raised to the limit and he turned into a faint blue light traveling thousands of miles in an instant. But Ji Tianxing was already prepared. The moment he turned to escape, he cast a spell to activate the primordial chaos bell, and it expanded to a radius of tens of thousands of miles. The massive primordial chaos bell was as black as ink, and it seemed to have become one with the void. In just an instant, it covered a radius of 50,000 miles, sealing off the area. God King Warwhale had just flown 40,000 miles when he was about to crash into the primordial chaos bell's wall. He reacted instantly and he was shocked and angry. He could not help but curse, "Damn beast. Is he really going to kill me? What is he relying on? Isn't he afraid of forcing me into a corner?" As he cursed, he hurriedly stopped running and he turned to look at Ji Tianxing with the sea-splitting halberd in his hand. He saw that in the void tens of thousands of miles behind him, Ji Tianxing was flying over unhurriedly. He was certain that Divine King Warwhale would not be able to escape and would definitely be suppressed within the primordial chaos bell. There was a confident smile on his face. Deity King Warwhale was also very calm. He released his divine senses and used his divine arts to observe the primordial chaos bell. He already knew how powerful the primordial chaos bell was, but this was the first time he was trapped inside it. Even though he knew that there wasn't much hope, he still wanted to give it a try. He wanted to see if he could break through the suppression of the divine clock and escape. He could clearly sense that not only was the divine bell incomparably sturdy and difficult to break, but it was also imbued with powerful laws and array Dao divine power. If they wanted to escape from the divine clock seal, it would definitely not be a simple matter. They would need to think about it at length. However, before he could further investigate the mystery of the god clock, Ji Tianxing flew over. Seeing that Ji Tianxing had no intention of communicating and was about to attack, God King Warwhale frowned and said in a low voice, "Long Tian, what are you trying to do? Your aggressiveness will do no good to the 10,000 Demon Alliance. I believe that you are not such a reckless person either. If you have any conditions or requests, we can still talk about it." Ji Tianxing's unreasonableness gave God King Warwhale a headache. He felt that Ji Tianxing's actions were unreasonable. Even though Ji Tianxing had explained the reason was not sufficient. It was too far-fetched. God King Warwhale felt that Ji Tianxing must have some other scheme. It was just that he was unwilling to say it out loud. Hearing God King Warwhale's words, Ji Tianxing, who was about to attack, was stunned. He raised his eyebrows and said in a playful tone, "I have said many times that I only want to injure you and ask you to obediently go into seclusion for a few decades. Why don't you believe me? Why do you feel that I have other motives? Is that not the case? How can there be such a ridiculous reason?" God King Warwhale frowned and asked. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and said with a serious expression, "Since you don't want to fight and want to use other methods to solve this matter, I will give you a chance. As long as you agree to my 2 conditions, today's matter will be over. How about it?" God King Warwhale was silent. He thought to himself, "This despicable little bastard, he really has other motives." Although he was secretly relieved and felt that there was still room for negotiation, he was still wary. However, he was also full of vigilance. He was worried that Ji Tianxing would make an excessive request. After a moment of consideration, he nodded and said, "What are the conditions?" Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, "First, you have to answer one of my questions truthfully. There must not be any deception." God King Warwhale frowned and seemed to want to bargain. Ji Tianxing added, "Don't worry, this question will not make you reveal any secrets, nor will it harm the interests of you and the Warwhale clan." God King Warwhale's brows relaxed when he heard that. He nodded and said, "I can agree to this. What's the second condition?" Ji Tianxing said with a playful smile, "You also know that the reason I pursued you so relentlessly is because I want you to rest for a few decades. Let's not beat around the bush. The Xuanji Grotto heaven has been conquered and the Star Source continent is ours. In the next few decades, we will be busy taking over the Star Source continent. We have no time to waste on you. So, you only need to swear a heavenly oath that you will not interfere with the myriad demon alliance's takeover of the Star Source continent for the next 100 years. You cannot become enemies with the myriad demon alliance, nor can you directly or indirectly interfere with this matter. In this way, this king's goal can be achieved, and naturally I won't fight with you again. What do you think?" This. God King Warwhale frowned and fell into hesitation. His face was very dark and his eyes flashed with anger. Obviously, he felt that being forced to swear a heavenly oath was a very humiliating thing. Previously, he learned from God King Wardragon that Shueshang was forced by Ji Tianxing to swear a heavenly oath that he would not attack Ji Tianxing. At that time he felt that it was laughable, and even Zhou Xian snorted and looked down on him. He did not expect that in the blink of an eye he would follow in Zhou Xian's footsteps and become a laughing stock. However, he was in a very passive position now. No matter how humiliating this condition was, he could not easily reject it. He had to weigh the pros and cons and consider the consequences of this matter. Tianqing was not anxious and did not rush him. He patiently waited for his answer. His expression and attitude were very calm. Even if God King Warwhale did not agree to this condition, he did not care. At most, the negotiation would fall apart and they would continue to fight. After about 20 breaths of time, God King Warwhale raised his head and looked at Tianqing expressionlessly. The anger in his eyes had already dissipated. Clearly, he had suppressed the anger in his heart and made a choice. Long Tian, I can agree to 2 of your conditions, but you must keep it a secret and not reveal it to anyone. This is the agreement between you and me. Tianqing was not surprised by God King Warwhale's conditions. After all, God King Warwhale was also afraid that he would reveal the news and embarrass himself, becoming the laughingstock of the Starsource continent. Chapter 3793. After God King Warwhale finished speaking, he stared coldly at Tianqing, waiting for his reaction. Tianqing revealed a playful smile and said, "Although I can understand your feelings, I'm sorry, but I can't agree to your conditions." You. God King Warwhale was enraged, his eyes flashing with fury. Terrifying killing intent burst out from his body, and he was about to turn hostile and break the agreement. Tianqing, however, was not in a hurry. He continued, God King Warwhale, you need to be clear about your situation. You don't want to fight right now, so I'm giving you a chance to settle this peacefully. If you can't accept these 2 conditions, then we'll have to return to the previous topic and see who's stronger. Let's fight first. As he spoke, he activated the primal chaos spell and released a majestic aura, causing the pressure on God King Warwhale to multiply. God King Warwhale fell silent again, his anger and killing intent receding into his body. He frowned deeply, his expression dark as he pondered. His heart was clearly conflicted. Tianqing knew that he was at a critical juncture, and the slightest mistake could change his mind. In fact, he was acting so forcefully because he knew what God King Warwhale was thinking. He didn't want to be buried with Enigma Grotto and wanted to protect himself. Now he had forced God King Warwhale to a dead end. If Xiaoqin continued to pressure him, this peak divine king would probably get angry and start an intense battle for the sake of his dignity and face. Even if Tianqing was confident that he could injure God King Warwhale with the primal chaos spell, he wouldn't have it easy either. Tianqing didn't want to see both sides suffer. After all, he still had many things to do. Therefore, when he saw God King Warwhale so hesitant and conflicted, he said, God King Warwhale, although I can't agree to your conditions and help you keep this secret, I believe you. I'm not a talkative person and I won't make a joke of this matter and spread it everywhere. This won't do me any good. You know that I only want the 10,000 Demon Alliance to take over the Star Origin continent smoothly. Why would I cause any trouble? Seeing that Tianqing's words were reasonable and his expression, eyes and tone were sincere and calm, God King Warwhale couldn't help but believe him a little. But he was still a little worried, so he tried to say, but you still have to give me a promise before I can be at ease. There was a difference between a promise and an oath. Of course, for top experts like him and Tianqing, a promise was also very effective, second only to an oath to the heavens. After all, they were all peak divine kings and also the few people with the highest authority and status on Starsource continent. Everyone cherished their reputation and reputation. No one would be a fickle and untrustworthy person. Even Zhou Xian, who did not have a dignified and domineering aura, did not dare to speak carelessly. Therefore, as long as Tianqing made a promise in person, God King Battle Whale would feel much more at ease. Tianqing stared at God King Battle Whale and analyzed his thoughts through his eyes and subtle expressions. After a while, Tianqing was sure that this was God King Battle Whale's bottom line, and also the only thing that worried him. As long as this problem was solved, God King Battle Whale should be able to accept it calmly. Therefore, Tianqing nodded slightly and said with a serious expression, God King Battle Whale, I can promise you that this matter will not be leaked. At most, I will only let a few people I trust know and I will order them not to leak it. This. God King Battle Whale's expression eased a lot, but he fell into deep thought and did not immediately agree. Tianqing looked at him calmly. His expression didn't change and he didn't say anything. Obviously he had already shown his bottom line by saying so much. God King Battle Whale was naturally aware of this. After pondering for a while he finally sighed and nodded. Fine. I have no grudges with you or the Myriad Demon Alliance. I can only blame myself for taking a wrong step and helping Mysterious Grotto. Now that we've come to this conclusion, it can be said that we've settled our grudges. Ask away Long Tian. Ji Tianxing did not waste any more time and asked directly, more than 10 years ago did you attack the lower realms? Or did you save or see a human youth? Lower realms? God King Battle Whale frowned, his face full of doubt and confusion. Although peak God Kings can comprehend the will of the heavenly Tao and condense a trace of the Tao, they are qualified to intervene in the lower realms. However, I was born in the Dragon Realm and grew up in the Dragon Realm. I have nothing to do with the lower realms. In fact, I have never even been to the God Realm, so why would I intervene in the lower realms' affairs? As for the human youth you speak of, I heard that the human race is an ancient race, right? Didn't they die out 30,000 years ago? Truth be told, I've never seen a human before in my life. God King Battle Whale's expression was rather strange. His gaze when looking at Ji Tianxing clearly had the meaning of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Originally he even thought that Ji Tianxing was going to ask about some important matter, some secrets related to the Dragon Realm. He did not expect that he would actually ask such a nonsensical thing. Ji Tianxing observed his expression carefully. Seeing his reaction he knew that he was not lying. Back then Ji Tianxing returned to the Dragon Realm precisely to find Ji Wuhan. Although what abducted Wuhan across the realm back then was a golden dragon's enormous claw. But Ji Tianxing could not confirm that the one who abducted Wuhan was definitely a peak God King realm golden dragon. That golden dragon's enormous claw might just be a divine ability transformed from an arcane art. Therefore, every peak God King was suspicious. Even God King Battle Whale was no exception. It was precisely because of this point that Ji Tianxing thought of asking God King Battle Whale this question at the last minute. Since he was sure that God King Battle Whale had nothing to do with this matter, then he did not need to investigate God King Battle Whale anymore. Hence, he continued, God King Battle Whale, you should fulfill the second condition. The second condition was naturally to swear a heavenly Tao oath. Regarding the contents of the heavenly Tao oath, God King Battle Whale pondered for a moment and had an idea. He gathered his emotions, his expression becoming solemn, and was about to open his mouth to recite the oath. But Ji Tianxing suddenly reached out and interrupted him. Hold on. God King Battle Whale's open mouth immediately closed, forcefully swallowing the words that were about to come out of his mouth. He turned his head to look at Ji Tianxing and asked with a frown, "What's wrong?" Ji Tianxing took out a jade slip and handed it to him with a playful smile, saying, "It's a heavenly Tao oath, so of course it has to be solemn and cautious. Don't say every sentence, even every word has to be carefully considered. What you thought of in a hurry is most likely not perfect and strict enough. I've already helped you think of the specific content of the oath. Just recite it according to this." God King Battle Whale was stunned on the spot. His expression was as if he had seen a ghost, his eyes glaring angrily at Ji Tianxing. That gaze seemed to be saying, "What the hell? You predicted this step long ago and even made preparations in advance just to scheme against this king?" Chapter 3794. Although God King War Whale understood the truth, he was even more depressed and aggrieved than before. Especially when he saw the heavenly Tao oath that had been prepared in the jade slip, his heart collapsed and he was speechless. The heavenly Tao oath that Ji Tianxing had provided was actually long and detailed, with a total of over 1,000 words. The contents of the oath not only described in detail the promise that God King War Whale had to fulfill, it also took into account all kinds of normal and abnormal accidents, and also limited and explained them. All in all, this was an oath to the Heaven Tao that was extremely perfect and detailed to the point of being horrifying. It was utterly impossible to pick out the slightest mistake from it, and it was impossible to take advantage of it. Your heavenly Tao oath is really strict enough. God King War Whale held the jade slip and looked at Ji Tianxing with a complicated expression, gritting his teeth as he spoke. Ji Tianxing ignored his anger and said indifferently, "It's good to be strict, this way you and I can both be at ease and the heavenly Tao will also feel that we are sincere." God King War Whale frowned and lowered his voice, saying in a contemptuous tone, "Long Tian, you are also a peak God King, don't be so mysterious. Do you think that a mere heavenly Tao oath can restrain people's hearts? You should know very well that other than those ignorant weaklings, the stronger one is, the less respect they have for the heavenly Tao. Ji Tianxing could not help but reveal a cold smile. Since you do not respect the heavenly Tao and feel that a heavenly Tao oath cannot restrain you, why don't you hurry up and swear a heavenly Tao oath and end this matter? God King Warwhale was speechless and his face flushed red. Indeed, he was like many God King experts, feeling that the concepts of heavenly Tao oath and heavenly Tao will were too illusory. After all, from ancient times until now, no one could say for sure what the heavenly Tao was. But the power of the heavenly Tao was real. No one could go against their conscience and say that the heavenly Tao did not exist. Therefore, everyone's mentality was very complicated, and they were skeptical of heavenly Tao oaths and rules. For example, Zhou Xian was in such a situation and mentality during this period of time. He was very confused and very aggrieved. Many times he wanted to ignore the heavenly Tao oath and fight to the death with Ji Tianxing. But when this thought appeared in his mind, his hands and feet would be tied, and he could not help but shrink back. God King Warwhale was silent for a moment before he suppressed his sullen and depressed emotions. At this point he could not resist. He only wanted to end this as soon as possible and then return to the South Sea to cultivate in seclusion. He did not want to see Ji Tianxing again. This person was too hateful. Then God King Warwhale held the jade slip and began to recite the heavenly Tao oath with a solemn expression. Ji Tianxing originally wanted to take back the primordial chaos spell to prevent the Tao runes of this divine artifact from affecting the heavenly Tao's senses. But he obviously worried too much. God King Warwhale's clear voice reverberated through the primordial bell. Soon, strands of Daoist rhymes appeared above his head and around him, and the will of the heavenly Tao descended. Clearly, even a supreme-grade king-level divine artifact like the primordial chaos spell could not block the detection of the heavenly way. When God King Warwhale was halfway through reciting the heavenly Tao oath, the heavenly way's senses had already formed. Around God King Warwhale, mystic rays of Daoist rhymes formed like lotuses. After a short while, when God King Warwhale finished reciting the heavenly Tao oath, thunder rumbled in the void, and the mighty power of the heavenly Tao descended. God King Warwhale's divine body and divine spark were enveloped by the power of the heavenly Tao, forming a connection with the heavenly Tao. This meant that the heavenly Tao oath had been formed and came into effect. Previously, God King Warwhale was still skeptical about the binding power of the heavenly Tao oath. But now he personally felt the power of the heavenly Tao. That vast and mighty power that he could not muster the slightest bit of resistance caused his expression to change. His face was a little pale and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. There was also a trace of reverence and fear in his eyes. He did not doubt that if the mighty power of the heavenly Tao wanted to punish him, he would not be able to resist at all and would be reduced to ashes immediately. The will of the heavenly Tao oath, it really does exist. God King Warwhale held the jade slip in his hand, watching the Tao charm gradually dissipate with a pale complexion as he muttered in his heart. After 10 breaths, the power of the heavenly Tao and the Tao charm already dissipated. Everything returned to tranquility. But God King Warwhale's heart was still surging with raging waves, unable to calm down. And at this time Ji Tianxing was also frowning, currently pondering over a problem. Strange, God King Warwhale swore the heavenly Tao oath and indeed attracted the heavenly Tao law and power. It even bore a lotus-like Tao charm. But back then when Zhou Xian swore the heavenly Tao oath, there was no such activity at all? Could it be that the heavenly Tao oath I made Zhou Xian swear was really too simple, and didn't receive the response of the heavenly Tao, so it didn't come into effect? Ji Tianxing knew that there would still be many opportunities to become enemies with peak divine kings in the future. But most of the time if he could not kill a peak divine king, he had to restrain the other party's actions. Then the heavenly Tao oath was the best choice. Through Zhou Xian and God King Warwhale's experiences, he roughly figured out the way and also had a clear judgment on whether the heavenly Tao oath was effective or not. He felt that this matter could be studied more thoroughly. If he could grasp the correct way to open the heavenly Tao oath, it would definitely be much more convenient for him to do things in the future. Just as he was thinking, God King Warwhale had already come to his senses and looked at him expressionlessly. He said, "Long Tian, I have already fulfilled my promise. Shouldn't you also?" God King Warwhale did not say anything, only looking up at the huge primordial chaos bell. Ji Tianxing immediately collected his thoughts and did not say anything more. He raised his hand and put away the primordial chaos spell. Swoosh. The huge primordial chaos spell instantly shrunk to the size of a foot and floated beside Ji Tianxing. As he put away the divine bell, God King War Whale only felt the pressure on him suddenly decrease, and his entire body relaxed. He tidied his clothes, used his divine power to wipe away the cold sweat on his forehead and turned to leave. He did not want to stay a moment longer, nor did he want to look at Ji Tianxing. He did not even want to say goodbye. However, Ji Tianxing put away the primordial chaos spell and reminded him. God King War Whale, remember your promise today. For the next 100 years, stay in the South Sea obediently and do not interfere with the continent's affairs. Of course, God King War Whale remembered. Why did he need Ji Tianxing to remind him? He was unhappy and replied with some anger, of course I will fulfill my promise. Probably because he was angry he could not help but ask, Long Tian, although I will not interfere in this matter, don't forget that the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor is still safe and sound. When the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor returns he will definitely take revenge on the 10,000 Demon Alliance. At that time if the 10,000 Demon Alliance cannot resist, they will spit out what they have eaten. If you die in the hands of the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor, I will still be very happy. Chapter 3795. Divine Emperor Battle Whale's words were sincere. Although he had reached an agreement with Ji Tianxing, it did not mean that there was no enmity between them. It also did not mean that he did not hate Ji Tianxing. It was just that he had weighed the pros and cons, suppressed his resentment and was forced to accept this solution. At the same time he did not mention the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor to threaten or remind Ji Tianxing. He was just stating a fact. Everyone in the Starsource continent knew that the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was undoubtedly the strongest. Not only was he the first to become famous, but he also possessed a supreme-grade king-level divine artifact. Old Ancestor Golden Rock, Alliance Leader Luo Ho and Divine Emperor Battle Whale could not be compared to him. Now that the Myriad Demon Alliance had conquered the Enigma Grotto Heaven, they wanted to seize the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's legacy. This was an irreconcilable hatred. Everyone knew that the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor would definitely rush back to the Dragon Realm and take revenge on the Myriad Demon Alliance. At that time, Ji Tianxing and Alliance Leader Luo Ho would not be able to defeat the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, or they would be killed by the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. The Myriad Demon Alliance's efforts would still be in vain. It did not mean that the Myriad Demon Alliance would be able to stabilize their position after conquering the Enigma Grotto Heaven. Ji Tianxing smiled and cupped his fists at Divine Emperor Battle Whale. You don't have to worry about this. Or you can stay in the South Sea and wait for news. Divine Emperor Battle Whale frowned and did not say anything after seeing how confident he was, as if he already had the confidence to deal with the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. Swoosh. He still didn't even say a word of farewell. He turned around and flew away with a cold face. Soon he disappeared into the pitch-black void. Ji Tianxing looked in the direction he left and sighed. I thought that as a peak divine emperor he would have some dignity and pride and would definitely not agree to my conditions. That way I would be able to fight him with all my strength and injure him. I did not expect him to be so cunning and flexible. He even accepted such a humiliating heavenly oath. Ji Tianxing's tone was filled with regret and pity. After all, Divine Emperor Battle Whale was the first peak divine emperor he had fought. He was also the best test. It was a pity that he did not get to test his true strength and potential. After a while Ji Tianxing stepped through the void and returned to the Xuanji Grotto. Although the void storm in the Xuanji Grotto Heaven had dissipated and the spatial tear had basically healed, the Xuanji Grotto Heaven was still in the Xuanji Grotto Heaven. However, the time was too short. There were still some cracks left on the spatial barrier, and they were slowly being repaired by the power of the heavenly law. Ji Tianxing found a spatial crack and forcefully tore it open. Then he passed through the spatial crack and returned to the Xuanji Grotto. It had been a few hours since the battle had begun. Aside from the violent divine power lingering in the air, Xuanji Grotto had returned to normal. Ji Tianxing flew across the sky and saw that the Golden Dragon Mountain range had already disappeared, turning into yellow sand and ravines. On a relatively flat piece of land he saw the soldiers of the Myriad Demon Alliance, as well as over 1,000 Sir Gods and a dozen godly kings from the Xuanji Grotto. All of them wore ragged clothes and were covered in bloodstains. They seemed to be in a miserable state and they were extremely exhausted and haggard. However, the soldiers of the Xuanji grotto looked numb and gloomy. Their eyes were filled with confusion and fear. Obviously, they were temporarily captives and did not know what their fate would be. On the other hand, the 3,000 soldiers of the Myriad Demon Alliance were in a better state of mind and they were in high spirits. Everyone had a victorious smile on their faces. At that moment, 2,000 of the 3,000 soldiers were meditating on the ground, concentrating on healing their wounds. The other 1,000 soldiers were Kenshin soldiers with swords, guarding over the 1,000 captives. Tianxing scanned the crowd with his divine consciousness and saw the left and right protectors and Xinyu who were severely injured. They were healing their wounds and waiting silently. However, Fu Ergu, the Minister of Internal Affairs, and Wanli Divine King were nowhere to be seen. Swoosh! Tianxing flew across the sky and came to the crowd, landing next to the left and right protectors. The two of them and Xinyu quickly came forward and bowed to Tianxing. "Young Master, you're back? Young Master, are you hurt? Where's Divine King War Whale? Has he been killed by the Young Master?" The three of them looked at Tianxing with concern. However, Tianxing did not know whether to laugh or cry at Xinyue's question. He could not help but ask, "Divine King War Whale is a peak Divine King. Why is the Great Elder so confident in me? How can a dignified peak Divine King be killed at will?" Xinyue was stunned for a moment. Only then did she realize that her confidence in the young master was too strong and unreasonable. However, she quickly smiled and explained, "Divine King War Whale is a peak Divine King, but so is the young master. Moreover, I believe that with the young master's strength and means, killing Divine King War Whale will not be a problem." The left and right protectors also nodded in agreement. The three of them looked at Tianxing with burning eyes. Their faces were full of anticipation, waiting for him to reveal the outcome of Divine King War Whale. Tianxing did not explain the details. He just said, "Divine King War Whale is not dead, but he returned to the South Sea. For the next 100 years he will not be our enemy." Hearing this, the three of them's eyes lit up. They all showed excited expressions. "As I expected, Divine King War Whale is really not the young master's match." The peak Divine King War Whale was also seriously injured by the young master. He could only escape to the South Sea in a sorry state and go into seclusion to heal his injuries for 100 years. The young master is mighty. Clearly, the left and right protectors and Xinyu had misunderstood. Tianxing only said that Divine King War Whale had returned to the South Sea and would not attack again for 100 years. However, the three of them were confident in their imagination and thought that Divine King War Whale was seriously injured and needed to heal for 100 years to recover. However, Tianxing did not intend to explain this misunderstanding. "Where's Fu Ergu? Where did he go?" The left and right protectors hurriedly explained, replying the young master. "During the battle previously, Lord Steward dealt with Divine King War Dragon and Xianxia. He killed Divine King War Dragon in the battle. Unfortunately, Xianxia had a supreme-grade divine artifact in hand. Lord Steward could not do anything to him. In the end, Xianxia charged out and killed more than 200 of our experts before escaping from Xuanji Grotto Heaven." Hearing up to here, Tianxing frowned and asked somewhat worriedly, "Could it be that Fu Ergu went to chase after Xianxia? Xianxia has old ancestor Qiongqi's indestructible golden body. Even if Fu Ergu chases after him, it's useless." Xinyu hurriedly waved her hand and explained, "Don't worry, young master. Lord Steward also understands this, so he did not pursue. Lord Steward only brought a dozen Divine King powerhouses to patrol Xuanji Grotto Heaven, searching for those who escaped from the battle previously." Only then did Tianxing relax. He nodded and said, "Then I'm relieved. During the battle previously, there were indeed many Divine Kings who had their divine bodies destroyed by me, but their divine cores escaped. Fu Ergu personally led the team. Hopefully he can clean up those guys." The left and right protectors hurriedly nodded, indicating that Lord Steward would definitely complete the mission. Chapter 3796. After figuring out Fu Ergu's whereabouts, Tianxing asked about the situation of the captives. The left and right protectors and Xinyu counted the captives and registered their names, waiting for Tianxing to deal with them. There were a total of 972 captives. Among them there were 960 god monarchs and 12 god kings. It was Tianxing's decision to kill or keep them. Tianxing's eyes swept across the captives and asked, "If I'm not wrong, You killed all the Golden Dragon guards before the war ended? The left protector nodded and said, Young master, you have sharp eyes. That is indeed the case. Those Golden Dragon guards are loyal to Xuanji Grotto. We must kill them all to be at ease. Ji Tianxing pointed at the captives and said, Since the remaining captives are all subordinate forces of Xuanji Grotto, their loyalty to Xuanji Grotto is limited. In fact, many of them have no grudges with our union. They just followed the wrong master. The right protector nodded slightly and agreed, Young master, you are right. Hu Xinyue's eyes brightened. She could roughly guess what Ji Tianxing meant. She asked, Young master, you mean? Ji Tianxing said calmly, Find out the identity of each captive. If they have any grudges with our union that cannot be resolved, kill them. If they have no grudges with our union, take them in if you can. If you can't, let them go. Of course, before you let them go, everyone must swear a heavenly oath. The left and right protectors and Hu Xinyue were stunned. They turned to look at Ji Tianxing with puzzlement. Young master, why do you want them to swear a heavenly oath? If you want to force them to swear a heavenly oath, why not force them to join our union and work for us? Ji Tianxing waved his hand and smiled. You don't understand. Even if they were forced to join the alliance, they would still have complaints in their hearts. When our union is strong, it is fine. If we encounter a crisis, they will be the source of internal strife. They are a great danger. As for making them swear an oath to the heavenly Tao, it is also to ensure that they will not go against our alliance in the future. After he finished speaking, he took out a jade slip and instructed the three of them. Here is a copy of the heavenly Tao oath. The three of you should make a few copies and carry out this matter one by one. Hu Xinyue subconsciously nodded her head and said, Yes. She didn't think much about it. When she took the jade slip and used her divine sense to look at the model of the heavenly Tao oath, her expression suddenly became somewhat strange. Young master, are you sure? You want them to swear according to this model? Ji Tianxing nodded calmly. Hu Xinyue had no choice but to follow his orders. The left and right protectors didn't know what was going on. They bowed to Ji Tianxing and left with Hu Xinyue to carry out the mission. Not long after, when the two of them forced the captive in front of them to recite the heavenly Tao oath according to the model, the two of them widened their eyes, and their expressions became rather strange. Only now did they understand the reason for Hu Xinyue's strange expression. The model of the heavenly Tao oath given by young master is really detailed and rigorous enough. Listening to the captive's sorrowful expressions and solemn tones as they recited the 1,000-word oath, the left and right protectors inexplicably sympathized with them. Fortunately, the captives' hearts were like dead ashes and they were full of despair. They thought that there was no way out for them. Now they were told that they only needed to recite the heavenly Tao oath, and they could leave alive without any punishment. To them, this was simply a piece of heavenly good news. Therefore, even if they recited the heavenly Tao oath that was sufficiently rigorous, they did not feel ashamed at all. Instead, they enjoyed it. Dealing with thousands of captives was a very troublesome and time-consuming thing. In particular, every captive had to be interrogated about their identity and background, and strive to be recruited into the 10,000 Demon Alliance. If they were unwilling to join the 10,000 Demon Alliance, they had to recite the heavenly Tao oath before they could leave. After such a torment, every captive would be delayed for half an hour. As a result, the left and right protectors Hu Xinyue, Ao Jinying, and the three elders, a total of 7 people, still took more than half a day to carry out this mission. In this half a day, Ji Tianxing had been tidying up the spoils of war and patrolling the Xuanji Grotto. Needless to say, the spoils of war were of course priceless. Just the godhood fragments in his spatial ring alone numbered more than 120, and they were all godhood fragments of god kings. As for patrolling the Xuanji Grotto, the reason was that the Xuanji Grotto's territory was too vast, and it was Ji Tianxing's first time here. He had to carefully inspect the Xuanji Grotto once, to have a sufficient understanding of it, and to look for places that might be dangerous. For example, was there any place in the Xuanji Grotto where some god kings and Golden Dragon Guard commanders were hiding? Or was there a hidden teleportation formation that could lead to the Dragon Realm? Or was there a place where the spatial barrier was weaker that could be broken through from the void and infiltrated the Xuanji Grotto? Ji Tianxing had to be on guard against these questions. It was worth mentioning that Ji Tianxing spent a total of 3 days patrolling the entire Xuanji Grotto. In the process of patrolling, he met the chief of internal affairs, Fu Ergu, who was leading a dozen god kings to search for the defeated soldiers. Fu Ergu killed a dozen hidden godhoods and handed them to Ji Tianxing. In the process of patrolling, Ji Tianxing also found a few hidden godhoods and smashed them into pieces. As a result, he had a total of 150 godhood fragments. In addition, he also found a few hidden palaces and 2 hidden treasure vaults. The palaces with special functions and the treasure vaults with hidden treasures were all guarded by a large number of golden dragon guards. Ji Tianxing acted alone and killed all the golden dragon guards. A few palaces remained, but the 2 treasure vaults were emptied. After 3 days, everything was done. The spoils of war that he had accumulated were already a terrifying amount of wealth. That evening, Ji Tianxing returned to the ruins of the Golden Dragon Mountain. 3,000 soldiers and all the overlords of the Monster League were waiting for him there. The thousands of captives had already been dealt with. Other than the 5 god kings and hundreds of divine lords who were willing to join the Monster League, the others left the Xuanji Grotto after swearing an oath. At that moment, everyone was looking at Ji Tianxing, waiting for his orders to carry out the next step of the plan. Ji Tianxing already had a plan, so he ordered the left and right protectors, the chief of internal affairs and the others, take the soldiers of the League back to the Monster City immediately and recuperate. When I'm not in the Monster City, the chief of internal affairs and the left and right protectors will be in charge. Upon hearing this order, it wasn't just the left and right protectors and elders who paled in fright. Many hall masters, branch masters and divine lord experts were also surprised and confused. Only the chief of internal affairs, Fu Ergu, seemed to have known Ji Tianxing's plan, and he still looked calm. Chapter 3797. Many hall masters, branch masters and monarch god experts were fearful of Ji Tianxing. Even if they were confused, no one dared to make a ruckus or question him. However, the left and right protectors and Xianxia had won Ji Tianxing's trust and respect. Confused, the 3 of them asked Ji Tianxing in a low voice. "Young master, are you sure you want everyone to retreat? What if other forces occupy it?" "Young master, we have gone through so much and paid such a huge price to occupy Xuanji Grotto Heaven. The billions of people in Stellar Source Continent all think that Xuanji Grotto Heaven is the rightful ruler. If we don't occupy it, how can we justify it?" Ji Tianxing's expression did not change as he secretly explained to the 3 through voice transmission. "The soldiers have just fought a great battle. It is not suitable for them to stay here. It is better for them to return to Myriad Demon City to recuperate. Don't worry, I will stay here and try to seal Xuanji Grotto Heaven. I will not let it fall into the hands of others. Moreover, as long as the Gold Source Dragon Emperor is not eliminated, our alliance will not be able to truly control Stellar Source Continent. Even if everyone stays here once the Gold Source Dragon Emperor returns, these soldiers will have died in vain." The left and right protectors and Xianxia suddenly understood Ji Tianxing's meaning. The 3 of them knew very well that although the Myriad Demon Alliance had won this battle, they had suffered great losses. Not to mention that the number of God King experts had been halved, just the number of Monarch God experts had been reduced by 60%. These 3,000 soldiers were the last backbone of the Myriad Demon Alliance. If the Gold Source Dragon Emperor returned and killed all of them or even half of them, the Myriad Demon Alliance's foundation would be severely damaged. The consequences would be unimaginable. Therefore, as long as the Gold Source Dragon Emperor was alive, the Myriad Demon Alliance would not be at ease and would not be able to smoothly control the entire continent. Ji Tianxing reminded them again, "I will stay here for a while. You must keep this a secret. Also, I have already instructed the Chief of Internal Affairs to contact Alliance Master Luo Ho and ask him to come back as soon as possible. You don't have to worry. Just do as I say." Only then did the 3 of them truly feel relieved, and they hurriedly complied. Next, Fu Ergu, the left and right protectors, Xianxia, and the others led the 3,000 soldiers out of the Xuanji Grotto. Yun Yao, Jiku, Chao Qingyu, Yank and the others were also severely injured. They all returned to the distorted spacetime to recuperate. In just an hour, the Enigma Grotto had become quiet and desolate. Ji Tianxing was left alone in the Enigma Paradise. Only then did he begin to deal with the aftermath. He rushed to the exit of the Grotto Heaven and destroyed the remaining divine formations. Then he took out a large number of origin stones, high-grade divine stones, and hundreds of emperor-grade divine artifacts and started to set up a divine formation. For the time being, he was unable to set up a supreme-grade king-grade divine array. However, he could set up 9 high-grade king-grade divine formations, stack them, and merge them together to form a divine formation that was no weaker than a supreme grade king grade divine formation. This divine formation was called the Nine Bends of the Heaven River Formation. It could absorb the power of the stars and seal the entrance of the Xuanji Grotto. Without this formation, one would not be able to enter or leave the Xuanji Grotto. Even a peak god king would have to use a supreme grade king grade divine artifact to break through this formation. Ji Tianxing knew very well that no matter what formation he set up, it would not be able to stop the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor. He had set up this divine formation only to stop experts other than the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor from entering. Furthermore, when the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor returned and wanted to enter the Xuanji Grotto, he would have to break through this divine formation. It would take a long time. He would also add some special restrictions to the divine formation. This way, when the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor attacked the divine formation, he would be able to sense it no matter where he was. Swoosh, swoosh. Ji Tianxing stood in the sky. Facing the mountain of origin stones, and divine artifacts on the ground, he sent out beams of divine light with his palms. Under his control, many materials for setting up the divine formation flew out like flowing water and landed around the exit. Then he made hand seals and began to set up the divine formation. First he set up the foundation of the divine formation. Next he set up the veins of the divine formation. Everything proceeded in an orderly manner. Time passed quickly. Day after day passed. Ji Tianxing was so focused on setting up the divine formation that he forgot about time. He was extremely focused. By the time he successfully set up the 9 bends of the Heaven River Formation, it was already a month later. Swoosh. Ji Tianxing sent out a beam of divine light with his palms and activated the 9 bends of the Heaven River Formation. Endless starlight surged from the void and quickly condensed into 9 silver heavenly rivers. The 9 heavenly rivers danced in the air like divine dragons, spiraling up and down. A huge door immediately appeared at the exit of the grotto. It led to the peak of Sky Crane Mountain. Once the divine formation was activated, it would continuously absorb the power of the stars. As long as the stars in the void were not destroyed, the divine power of the divine formation would never be depleted. Moreover, as time passed, the divine formation's power would also grow stronger. After a while, Ji Tianxing sent out a beam of divine light with his palms and closed the door to the exit. He turned and flew into the depths of the Xuanji Grotto. He entered a secluded palace among the mountains and began to cultivate. This palace was one of the holy grounds of the Xuanji Grotto for seclusion. The entire palace was made of rare materials. It had the effect of gathering and purifying divine power. It could also clear one's soul and will and improve one's comprehension. Ji Tianxing entered the secret chamber of the palace. He took out the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Pagoda and entered the distorted spacetime. He used a month to set up the formation. In the distorted spacetime, everyone had been recuperating in seclusion for more than 4 years. When he returned to the Blood Flame Sacred Tree and saw Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others, everyone's appearance had returned to normal. They were no longer in a sorry state and tired state. Their injuries had also recovered by more than half. They were still focused on healing their injuries. Ji Tianxing did not disturb them. He meditated and cultivated under the sacred tree, silently recovering his divine power. Although he had only suffered minor injuries in the previous battle, he had used up a lot of his divine power. After the battle, he did not recuperate. Instead, he spent another month setting up the formation. No matter how strong his willpower was, he could not take it anymore. He felt tired. Therefore, he first recuperated for 3 months. He recovered to his peak condition and healed his injuries. Then he began to count the spoils of war. He stored the 150 Godhead fragments separately. He would need them later on for his cultivation. The main objects of inventory were the hundreds of spatial rings and the resources moved from the 2 treasure vaults. The owners of the hundreds of spatial rings were all godly king experts. They were either the leaders of first-rate forces, the sect masters, or the masters of various regions. In short, each of them held great power and controlled a large amount of wealth and resources. Naturally, these spatial rings also stored a large amount of cultivation resources and treasures. Ji Tianxing used 2 days to count the hundreds of spatial rings and put the resources and treasures into his own spatial ring. It was difficult to calculate the exact value of these resources and treasures. However, after a rough estimate, there were at least 30 trillion. The value of the 2 treasure vaults in the Xuanji Grotto was close to 70 trillion. Therefore, Ji Tianxing's wealth and resources exceeded 100 trillion. Chapter 3798. Cultivation resources worth hundreds of trillions of divine stones. This was the most wealth Ji Tianxing had ever obtained in his life. It was the wealthiest moment of his life. He was in a good mood. However, it was just a good mood. He was not too excited about it. After all, he was now an upper godly king. His combat strength was comparable to a peak godly king. He could even fight a peak godly king. At his level, his insight and knowledge were beyond the reach of ordinary godly spirits. As long as he was willing, he could inherit the Myriad Demon Alliance. He could even control the entire Starsource continent and become the master of this continent. Compared to the position of the overlord of the continent, hundreds of trillions of divine stones were nothing. The entire continent was his. He could get as much wealth and resources as he wanted. To him, cultivation resources would become external objects when they reached a certain level. The most important thing was still strength. Therefore, after he checked his spoils of war, he began to refine the Godhead fragments to quickly increase his strength. Borrowing the power of the heaven-mending pearl, 2 white light vortexes appeared in his palms and quickly devoured the Godhead fragments. As time passed, the Godhead fragments were devoured and turned into nothingness. On the other hand, he had obtained a vast amount of divine power, and he had also obtained many divine runes of laws from the quintessence fragments. His strength increased rapidly, and the number of divine Tao laws he condensed increased. Even though he was cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime, he had a mysterious connection with the 9 bends of Heaven Rivers formation at the entrance of the mysterious grotto. Once an expert attacked the formation or barged into the mysterious grotto, he would be able to sense it. Unfortunately, the 9 bends of Heaven Rivers formation did not move for a long time. It had been 3 months since the decisive battle between the Myriad Demon Alliance and the mysterious grotto. The process and final result of the decisive battle had spread throughout the Starsource continent. Everyone knew about it. In these 3 months, the entire Starsource continent was in a state of shock and madness. Not only were the forces of the various regions and empires discussing it, but even the common people on the streets and alleys were talking about it. No one could believe that the mysterious grotto that had ruled the Starsource continent for more than 20,000 years was conquered by the Myriad Demon Alliance just like that. In the eyes of the common people, the Xuanji Grotto was a supreme and unparalleled existence. Even though the Myriad Demon Alliance was a super force that had risen to fame in the past 1,000 years, it was still incomparable to the Enigma Paradise, much less a threat to the Enigma Paradise's dominance. Who would have thought that such a ridiculous scene would actually appear? Even though there were various versions of legends and news that were widely spread across the Starsource continent. However, the commoners found it hard to accept this result. They were shocked for a long time before they calmed down. The information that was flying everywhere was enough to reconstruct the process of the 10,000 Demon Alliance's conquest of the Xuanji Paradise. Under the deliberate propaganda of the Myriad Demon League, the people of the entire continent knew that the acting leader of the Myriad Demon League was a peak divine king, a wise and mighty overlord. It was this acting alliance master who had used his wits to break through the Xuanji Grotto's defenses. He had defeated the peak godly kings invited by the Xuanji Grotto. Elder Golden Rock was easier to deal with. According to the news released by the 10,000 Demon Alliance, he was described as a wise man who followed the will of the heavens. However, the Battle Whale Divine King was unlucky. He had become Long Tian's background and a stepping stone for Long Tian's fame. As the news spread, the news that the Myriad Demon League was going to take over the Starsource continent also spread across the continent. Long Tian's unparalleled fame had also become a household name, reverberating like thunder in the ears. After 3 months, the impact of the news of the Myriad Demon League's victory on the commoners gradually weakened. However, one could foresee that it would take at least a few years for the shock to fade away. By then, the wariness and resistance of the territorial lords, the various top forces, and the various major races towards the Myriad Demon League would gradually disappear. Only then would the Myriad Demon League's takeover of the Starsource continent begin gradually. It was not something that could be completed overnight. Ji Tianxing's prediction of 50 years was more logical. Of course, this was based on the assumption that the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was eliminated without any accidents. If the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was not eliminated, there would always be a huge threat. With the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's prestige and charisma on the continent, he could easily summon countless forces and experts to help him destroy the Myriad Demon League and take back his position as the overlord. It was because of this that Ji Tianxing had stayed in the Xuanji Grotto Heaven alone to wait for the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's return. At the same time, the Myriad Demon League was also doing their best to investigate and find out more about the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. They had to find out where the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was and when he would return to the Dragon Realm. Also, the Chief of Internal Affairs and the Left and Right Protectors had contacted Alliance leader Luo Ho twice after returning to the Myriad Demon City. They had conveyed the details of the battle and Ji Tianxing's instructions to Alliance leader Luo Ho. Alliance leader Luo Ho also knew the importance of this matter and decided to postpone the matter in the Outer Realm and return to the Dragon Realm to oversee the Myriad Demon League. However, the Starsource continent in the Outer Realm was too far away from the Dragon Realm. Even if he rushed back at full speed, he would not be able to return in a few months. Ji Tianxing had been cultivating in seclusion for 8 years in the distorted spacetime and had only managed to refine the 150 quintessence fragments. Now that he had reached the late 7th Heaven God King realm, he had obtained another 80 divine Dao laws from the quintessence fragments. The number of divine Dao laws he grasped thus reached as many as 830 types. Without a doubt, he had gained a lot from his seclusion and his combat strength had increased by 2 times. After finishing his cultivation, Ji Tianxing left the distorted spacetime and patrolled the Xuanji Grotto Heaven again. There was nothing unusual about the entrance of the Grotto Heaven and the interior of the Grotto Heaven. In the past few months, no one had infiltrated the Xuanji Grotto Heaven and no one had dared to attack the entrance. At this moment, apart from Ji Tianxing, there were only endless cultivation resources and natural treasures in the Xuanji Wonderland. He was slightly disappointed and prayed silently in his heart that the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor would return soon and stop wasting time. This was the only way he could get rid of the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor as soon as possible. After getting rid of this huge problem, the Myriad Demon League would be able to smoothly take over the Starsource continent. At that time he could leave with peace of mind and head to other continents to continue his search for Wu Hen. After patrolling the Grotto Heaven for 3 days, Ji Tianxing returned to the secret chamber in the Celestial Palace and entered the distorted spacetime to continue his seclusion. This time he would use up a huge amount of cultivation resources and divine pills to comprehend and deduce the heaven-punishing divine skill in order to strengthen his foundation of the divine Dao and improve his mystique skills. If possible, he wanted to break through to the 8th Heaven God King realm. If he could break through to the 8th Heaven God King realm before the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor returned, he would have a greater chance of defeating the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. Chapter 3799. Time passed quickly in the Xuanji Utopia. It was quiet and dull. Ji Tianxing had been cultivating in seclusion in the secret chamber of the Divine Palace. He was trying his best to strengthen his foundation and break through to the 8th level of the Divine King realm. At the same time, he was waiting for news from the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. Unfortunately, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor had not made a move even though he was getting closer and closer to the 8th level of the Divine King realm. At the same time, the 3,000 soldiers of the Myriad Demon Alliance were recovering in seclusion in the Myriad Demon City and their various branches. The Myriad Demon Alliance had won the battle a few months ago. However, they had also suffered a huge blow. They had lost too many experts and were greatly weakened. In the past few months, the Myriad Demon Alliance had been recuperating and did not take the opportunity to expand their forces and territory. This was Ji Tianxing's intention. The Chief of Internal Affairs and the Left and Right Protectors understood his intentions and supported this decision. After all, as long as the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was not eliminated, the Myriad Demon Alliance would return sooner or later even if they took over the entire continent. Therefore, it was better for them to recuperate and gradually take over the entire continent after the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was eliminated. Of course, this was only part of the reason. The more important reason was that the Starsource continent was still in a period of turmoil. The news of the Myriad Demon Alliance conquering the Xuanji Utopia was still widely spread and discussed. The shock and astonishment of the billions of people had yet to be calmed down. The Myriad Demon Alliance's intelligence organization had investigated. Most people thought that this was a chaotic situation. The change of the overlord would definitely cause chaos on the continent. Therefore, it was not an exaggeration to say that the Star Source continent was in a state of panic. Countless people were worried and countless forces were on tenterhooks. Furthermore, there were even countless people who were prepared to flee to avoid disaster. This was because everyone believed that the myriad demon alliance conquering the Xuanji utopia was only the beginning of a great war. When the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor returned and gathered his forces to launch a counterattack, the real war would begin. The people did not care who won or lost. They were only afraid that the flames of war would spread across the entire continent and affect them. Of course, there were also many experts and factions who were hesitating and observing the situation. They did not belong to any faction, but they wanted to obtain the corresponding status and benefits from this unprecedented war. There were also some subordinate forces of the abstruse Grotto Heaven and the old subordinates of the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. They were currently hiding in grief, but they were secretly colluding with each other. Naturally, they were unwilling to admit defeat. They were still thinking of ways to preserve their strength and wait for the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor to return so that they could make a comeback. Naturally, the 10,000 Demon Alliance was not idle either. The elites who had participated in the battle were indeed in seclusion to heal their wounds. However, the other 20,000+ alliance members who did not participate in the war had become extremely busy in the past few months. Other than the normal operations of the 10,000 Demon Alliance, they had to carry out a lot of missions. For example, investigating the whereabouts and news of the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was a top priority. Another example was investigating the forces and experts who were extremely loyal to the Xuanji Grotto and couldn't bear to part with them, and secretly eliminating and assassinating them. Another example would be to drive a wedge between the factions that belonged to the Xuanji Utopia, but were only interested in survival and profit and did not have much loyalty. In addition, he also had to persuade and pacify those fence-sitters who were swaying left and right. The 10,000 Demon Alliance would use all kinds of methods to pacify them, regardless of whether they were first-rate forces or godly king experts. If they could be recruited into the 10,000 Demon Alliance, that would be the best. Even if they could not be recruited into the 10,000 Demon Alliance, they had to ensure that these fence-sitters would not side with the Xuanji Grotto and go against the 10,000 Demon Alliance. Of course, there was one more thing that the 10,000 Demon Alliance had been carrying out. That was to create rumors and deliberately spread all kinds of opinions. Ao Jinying had always been in charge of this. He was very familiar with this kind of work. Before the 10,000 Demon Alliance attacked the Xuanji Grotto, Ao Jinying had already done something similar. His goal was to manipulate public opinion and stir up the discussion of countless people on the continent, as well as achieve the effect of propaganda and bewitchment. To put it simply, he wanted to brainwash the billions of people so that they would gradually accept the 10,000 Demon Alliance as the ruler of the Star Source continent. Moreover, he wanted to smear and weaken the image of the Xuanji Grotto, lowering the prestige of the Xuanji Grotto in the hearts of the people. These were only some of the things that the 10,000 Demon Alliance had been doing in the past few months. There were many more complicated things that could not be explained in a few words. Fortunately, the 10,000 Demon Alliance had enough members and recruited the elites of all walks of life. They were good at all kinds of tasks. Ji Tianxing, the left and right protectors, the general manager of internal affairs, the elders, and the others only needed to discuss the countermeasures and issue orders. If they were asked to do these trivial things in person, there was no telling how many years it would take to finish them. All in all, the 10,000 Demon Alliance was not expanding, not waging war, and not in a hurry to take over the Star Source continent. However, the 10,000 Demon Alliance was not doing nothing. They were still actively preparing and paving the way for the takeover of the Star Source continent. Although Ji Tianxing was far away in the Xuanji Grotto, he had made a plan long ago. He asked the left and right protectors Hu Xinyue, Ao Jinying, and the others to act according to the plan. Ao Jinying was in charge of collecting information and carrying out assassinations. Hu Xinyue was in charge of appeasing and buying people's hearts. The left and right protectors were in charge of destroying the forces that were very loyal to the Xuanji Grotto. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. If the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor appeared, Ji Tianxing would naturally deal with him and think of a way to eliminate him. If the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor did not appear, then as time passed, the hearts and minds of the people on the Star Source continent would change. Perhaps after 10 or 8 years, the people's hearts would no longer be with the Xuanji Grotto, but the 10,000 Demon Alliance. At that time, even if the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor returned to the Star Source continent, It would be impossible for him to gather his former subordinates and launch a counterattack against the 10,000 Demon Alliance. This was Ji Tianxing's plan. He was preparing for both sides so that the 10,000 Demon Alliance could smoothly rise to power. Unknowingly, an entire year had passed in the turmoil of the Starsource continent. In this entire year, the undercurrents of the Starsource continent were surging. The situation was very chaotic and complicated. However, under the secret control of the 10,000 Demon Alliance, no major chaos occurred. There were no wars or large-scale massacres. However, many forces and experts had quietly left the Starsource continent to seek shelter in other places. This was something that no one could avoid. There were also many forces and God King experts who could not resist the temptation of the 10,000 Demon Alliance and changed their allegiance to the 10,000 Demon Alliance. Other than that, a few forces that belonged to the Xuanji Grotto and were extremely loyal to the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor disappeared without anyone noticing. There was no doubt that it was the 10,000 Demon Alliance who did it. Everyone knew that once the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor returned, those forces would definitely respond to the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor's orders and launch a counterattack against the 10,000 Demon Alliance. Since that was the case, the 10,000 Demon Alliance naturally had to eliminate them as soon as possible to prevent future disasters. However, the 10,000 Demon Alliance purposely concealed the news to prevent this elimination of dissidents from causing panic among the people. Chapter 3800. After a year, the shock and fear that the myriad Demon Alliance had brought to the people of Xuanji Grotto Heaven had finally faded. In this year, the Starsource continent seemed to be relatively peaceful. The unrest had gradually subsided. However, there were many things that the commoners did not notice that were secretly changing. Even the thoughts of hundreds of millions of ordinary people were subtly influenced. To everyone's knowledge, the myriad Demon Alliance was on par with Xuanji Grotto Heaven. They were qualified to rule the Starsource continent. The people, empires, and forces were no longer afraid of the myriad Demon Alliance taking over the Starsource continent. These subtle changes did not seem to have much effect. However, this meant that there would not be any major problems when the myriad Demon Alliance took over the Starsource continent in the future. In the Divine Palace in the mountains of Xuanji Grotto Heaven, Ji Tianxing left the distorted space and ended his 45 years of secluded cultivation. That's right. A year had passed in the outside world, but he had been in seclusion in the Divine Pagoda for more than 40 years. Hard work paid off. After this seclusion, he had used more than 200 billion worth of cultivation resources and finally achieved his goal. He had successfully broken through to the 8th level of the Divine King realm. He had also perfected the 5th level of the heaven-punishing divine art. His combat strength had increased by several folds, and his foundation of the divine Tao was very firm. Now he was even more confident in fighting the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. Swoosh. After leaving the Divine Palace in the mountains, he stepped into the sky and rushed to the exit of Xuanji Grotto Heaven. After staying in the Xuanji Grotto Heaven for a year, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor had not appeared. He was finally tired of waiting. After staying in the Divine Palace for so long, he wanted to go out for a walk and settle old scores with someone. Soon he left the Xuanji Grotto Heaven through the great formation of 9 bends of heaven. After crossing the peak of Heavenly Crane Mountain, he flew north at lightning speed. He thought to himself, it's been a year. If that guy has already left the Starsource continent, I'll just let it go. If he's still thinking that he can escape this calamity, then I'm sorry. After thinking for a while, he took out a communication jade slip, intending to ask Ao Jinying about the situation. After all, Ao Jinying had the ability to gather information and was more familiar with the situation. After sending out the message, Ji Tianxing continued on his way. In the blink of an eye, he had traveled thousands of miles to the north. Soon half an hour had passed and Ao Jinying also sent back a message. Ji Tianxing took the jade slip and read it. He frowned and sneered. I guessed it right. But this guy is interesting. After muttering to himself, he put away the jade slip and continued on his way. The Nebula Cave was as calm and peaceful as ever. Even though the 10,000 Demon Alliance's invasion of the Xuanji Grotto Heaven had shaken the Starsource continent for a year, the Starsource continent was still in turmoil. However, during this year the Nebula Paradise remained closed as if it was isolated from the rest of the world. The patriarch and elders of the Xianxia clan did not contact any forces in the outside world, nor did they get involved in the conflicts between the 10,000 Demon League and the Xuanji Paradise. It was as if no matter who was in charge of the Starsource continent, it had nothing to do with the Xianxia clan. The entrance to the Nebula Cave had always been closed, and no one was allowed to enter or leave. A year ago, when Patriarch Xiang returned, he even ordered the construction of 2 more divine arrays to reinforce the seal of the entrance. More than 4,000 Xianxia clan members thought that Patriarch Xiang had made up his mind to avoid worldly affairs and had decided to cultivate in seclusion. This puzzled many of the clan members, and they discussed and complained in private. Many young experts thought that the situation in the Starsource continent was chaotic, and it was a good opportunity to seize benefits and make a fortune. If Patriarch Xiang could use some ingenious methods, he would be able to benefit the Xianxia clan greatly. Those young experts thought so, and they spread the word and persuaded him everywhere in the clan. After a few months of preparation and development, nearly half of the clan members agreed with this idea. They joined forces and asked the Patriarch to open the entrance to the Nebula Cave, so that the Xianxia clan could join the chaos and take advantage of the situation. However, the proposal of many clan members was rejected by Xiang. Not only that, Xiang was furious and severely punished several deacons and young experts who took the lead in stirring up trouble. After this incident, the clan members knew Xiang's determination, and no longer mentioned taking advantage of the situation. They all stayed in the Nebula Cave and cultivated. Everyone thought that the Patriarch wanted to stay out of trouble and wait for changes. Only a few elders knew that Patriarch Xiang was not waiting for the best price. He was waiting for the battle between the Myriad Demon Alliance and the Xianxia Cave to end before deciding his position. The Patriarch Xiang was very anxious. He was worried every day and could not eat or sleep well. Although he claimed to the clan members that he had been cultivating in seclusion in the secret chamber. But in fact, Xiang had only rested for a month. After he recovered to his peak state, he had not cultivated for a day. He could not calm down and cultivate at all. He was always frowning and worried about the future of the Xianxia clan. The elders were puzzled and asked Xiang many times what was going on that made him so worried. At first, Xiang was hesitant and he was not willing to disclose other things. After 2 or 3 months, Xiang finally revealed the truth, probably because he could not bear the pressure and mental torture. It turned out that when the Myriad Demon Alliance attacked the Xianxia Cave, he had secretly joined the Xianxia Cave without telling his clan members and formed a grudge with the Myriad Demon Alliance. The elders finally understood that Xiang was afraid of the Myriad Demon Alliance's revenge. They were all smart people. Some things did not need to be discussed. For example, after the Myriad Demon Alliance took over the Xianxia Cave, it seemed that they did not do anything. They did not expand their forces and eliminate their opponents. However, the Myriad Demon Alliance did it to stabilize the people's hearts. It did not mean that after the situation stabilized, they would not eliminate their enemies. With what Xiang had done to the Myriad Demon Alliance, the Myriad Demon Alliance would definitely settle the score. Therefore, Xiang and the elders stayed in the secret chamber to discuss countermeasures. Someone suggested that Xiang take the Xianxia clan to abandon the Nebula Cave and escape from the Starsource continent. With the strength of the Xianxia clan, even if they went to other continents, they would be able to make a name for themselves. However, this suggestion was rejected by Xiang and the elders. The Xianxia clan had occupied the Nebula Cave for more than 20,000 years. They had long regarded this place as their home, and all their forces and properties were in the surrounding areas. Leaving their home to other continents would be difficult and dangerous, and they would have to start from scratch. Not only did Xiang and the elders not want to give up the Nebula Cave, but the thousands of clan members would also not agree. Soon, another elder suggested that they submit to the Myriad Demon Alliance and apologize for what happened before, hoping to be forgiven by the Myriad Demon Alliance. Of course, this was only a temporary measure to resolve the grudge between the Xianxia clan and the Myriad Demon Alliance. They would not really join the Myriad Demon Alliance. Xiang thought about it for a few days and actually agreed to this suggestion. He personally wrote a letter to the Myriad Demon Alliance, sending gifts, apologizing and asking for peace. Chapter 3801. If it had been Battle Dragon King or Qin Yu, they would never have chosen such a method. They were more decisive and had a kind of black and white characteristic. If they offended a certain force, there would only be 2 results. Either they would destroy that force and survive. If they could not afford to offend that force, they would retreat and escape. Even if there was a third result, they would join a stronger force and use it to destroy the enemy. Xiang had offended the 10,000 Demon Alliance, but still thought that he could resolve the hatred and take the initiative to make peace with the 10,000 Demon Alliance. He would definitely be despised by Battle Dragon King and Qinyu. But they were not Xiang. They could not understand Xiang's complicated feelings, and their style was different from Xiang's. To be precise, Xiang was a sinister and despicable guy. He was scheming, but he always wanted to take advantage of both sides and sit on the fence trying to gain benefits from it. As for dignity, hot-bloodedness and integrity, he did not care. In his opinion, as long as it involved benefits, there was nothing that could not be resolved. There was no hatred that could not be resolved. After all, there was no blood feud between him and the 10,000 Demon Alliance. He carefully thought about it for a month and found a problem. Since he became enemies with Long Tian, he had been abused and suffered heavy losses. Long Tian and the 10,000 Demon Alliance did not suffer any losses. He did not offend the 10,000 Demon Alliance, and after he was forced by Long Tian to make a heavenly oath, he never attacked Long Tian again. Therefore he felt that there was still room for reconciliation. With this idea, he sent the second elder to the 10,000 Demon Alliance with gifts and a letter written by him to apologize. The result was as he expected. The 10,000 Demon Alliance's general manager, protector and great elder did not receive the second elder, nor did they accept the apology. But Xiang was not discouraged. After a month, he sent the second elder to the 10,000 Demon Alliance again to apologize. This time he still brought a letter written by him, and the gifts he brought were doubled. As a result, the second elder met Great Elder Hu Xinyue and also expressed his intention. However, Hu Xinyue neither accepted the gifts nor the second elder's apology, nor did she have the intention to reconcile. But Xiang was not angry. Instead, he felt that there was some progress and he saw the hope of reconciliation. Thus he sent the second elder a third time, a fourth time and a fifth time to apologize. Every month, the second elder would make a trip to the 1,000 Demon City with heavy gifts. However, the 10,000 Demon Alliance never accepted the gifts, nor was it willing to compromise. However, Xiang felt that the 10,000 Demon Alliance would relent sooner or later after seeing his sincerity. Today it was time for the second elder to go to the 10,000 Demon Alliance again. This was the 6th time that the second elder had gone to the Myriad Demon League. In order to show his sincerity, Xiang even sent the third elder to accompany him. Furthermore, the gifts that the two elders brought were even more precious than the last time. Inside the secret chamber of the Divine Palace, Xiang was telling the two elders to pay attention to the details and to observe the situation to test the attitude of the 10,000 Demon Alliance. The two elders listened attentively, nodding from time to time or asking a few questions. The atmosphere was quite harmonious and relaxed. After all, the second elder was almost familiar with the 10,000 Demon Alliance. He and the third elder would head to the Demon City. Regardless of whether or not they could resolve the enmity, at least they would not be in any danger. But at this moment, the voice of a guard suddenly came from outside the secret room. "Patriarch, something is wrong. Someone is attacking the divine array at the entrance of the Nebula Paradise." The young guard's tone was quite anxious and worried. Xiang and the two elders heard it clearly and immediately frowned, revealing a puzzled look. The three of them did not understand who would attack the Nebula Paradise at this time. It was definitely not the 10,000 Demon Alliance. But other than the 10,000 Demon Alliance, who else could it be? Xiang's face was a little gloomy. He sneered and said in a cold tone, "Humph. Although our clan can't compete with the 10,000 Demon Alliance and the Xuanji Paradise, we are not to be trifled with. Probably because our clan has been too low-key in the past year, some forces have looked down on us. There's actually a fellow who doesn't open his eyes and has designs on this seat." The two elders nodded in agreement, showing indignation on their faces. Xiang waved his hand to open the door of the secret chamber and walked out with the two elders. At the same time, he ordered the guard, "Summon the blood slaughter hall immediately and follow me to the exit to see the situation." The guard acknowledged the order and hurriedly retreated to pass on the order. The two elders hesitated for a moment and asked, "Clan leader, what about the two of us? Are we still going to the 10,000 Demon Alliance?" Xiang answered without turning his head, "Come with me to see. As long as it's not the 10,000 Demon Alliance, you can do whatever you want." The two elders hurriedly made a statement. At the same time, at the exit of the Nebula Paradise, the sealing divine array that had been strengthened many times had been activated. On the millstone array base that had a radius of 10,000 feet, colorful divine light condensed into a shield that blocked the exit. The exit was a spatial door that was 1,000 feet tall. It was flashing with a dazzling white light and fluctuating constantly. The divine light shield that had a radius of 10,000 feet was also trembling violently and shaking. Obviously, someone was attacking the sealing divine array outside the nebula paradise with all his might. The hundreds of guards guarding the exits stared at the blazing white light gate without blinking. They looked as if they were facing a great enemy. Everyone looked serious. They held their divine weapons in their hands and accumulated divine power in their bodies. They were ready to fight at any time. Although they had not seen who was bold enough to attack the Nebula Paradise's sealing divine array. However, the guards knew that the enemy was definitely one of the best among the supreme gods. After all, the sealing divine array was a superior king level 1. It had been strengthened by clan leader Zhou Xian himself. This person could shake the sealing divine array. He was definitely not weak. Most importantly, everyone knew that the Daoist paradise was the Xianxia tribe's nest. Since the enemy dared to attack the Nebula Paradise, it meant that they did not take the Xianxia tribe seriously. Thinking of this, the hundreds of guards became even more nervous. Bam, bam, bam. As the sealing divine array trembled violently, a series of muffled sounds could be heard. Soon the guards saw with their own eyes that the divine light shield that had a radius of 10,000 feet started to shatter and collapse. The spatial door that was 1,000 feet tall was also flashing with white light. It was as if something was about to come out. Retreat. Everyone retreat. Sensing that the sealing divine array was about to be broken, the guard commander hurriedly ordered the guards to retreat. Just as expected. Once the guards retreated to about 10 miles away, the divine light shield exploded with a loud boom. At the same time, the spatial door flashed with white light. A figure wrapped in golden light forcefully charged through the door. Zhoosh. In the next moment, the white-robed figure passed through the spatial door and entered the Nebula Paradise. The gazes of over 100 guards were focused on the white-robed young man. Their nerves were tense. Chapter 38:02. The white-robed youth was from the Dragon clan. He was very handsome and mighty. His strength and realm could not be seen, but he revealed an unfathomable aura. He had one hand behind his back and the other holding a pitch-black divine sword. He swept his gaze across the many guards expressionlessly. Then he ignored the hundreds of guards and looked into the depths of the grotto heaven with a calm expression. His expression and reaction made the guard commander's expression even more solemn. He secretly cursed in his heart. As the guard commander, the other party barged in so rudely. He had to take action to stop him. But he understood that with his strength as a low-level divine king, he probably could not even take one move from the other party and would die on the spot. If he did not fulfill his duty, he would definitely be severely punished by the clan rules. If he fulfilled his duty, he would be killed on the spot. The guard commander was in a dilemma. His expression was extremely ugly and his heart was in his throat. Fortunately, the white-robed youth did not make a move. It was as if he was waiting for something. Of course, the guard commander would not take the initiative to make a move. He was in a deadlock with the other party, silently praying that the clan leader would come quickly. In his opinion, a powerhouse like the white-robed youth, most likely only the clan leader could deal with it. Not long later, a guard shouted with joy, "Lord Clan Leader is here." The guard commander and everyone hurriedly turned their heads and saw in the sky in the depths of the grotto heaven, several divine lights sped over. In a few breaths' time, those few divine lights came close and stopped above the heads of the many guards. The divine lights faded. The figures of the clan leader, Zhou Xian, and 4 elders appeared in front of everyone. Seeing these 5 powerhouses come, the guard commander secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Sure enough, when Zhou Xian saw the white-robed youth at the entrance, his pupils constricted first, then he revealed a trace of a bitter smile. He did not panic and concealed his emotions very well. He ordered in a dignified tone, "All of you withdraw. This is my esteemed guest. Don't be rude to esteemed guests." Although no one believed this sentence. Even the simple-minded guards also did not believe that the white-robed youth would be the clan leader's esteemed guest. But the clan leader definitely had a deeper meaning for saying so. Therefore, the guard commander still acknowledged the order and withdrew with close to 100 guards. Just like this, only the white-robed youth Xiang and the 4 elders were left at the entrance. The 4 elders sized up the white-robed young man, their eyes full of vigilance. Suddenly, someone guessed something and his expression changed immediately. He secretly transmitted a message to his companion. This person is Long Tian. The other 3 elders were also shocked, revealing a look of dread and fear. What? It's him? Long Tian? The acting leader of the Myriad Demon Alliance? What was he doing here? Revenge? If he's here for revenge, why did he come alone? The elders discussed in secret, their hearts full of doubts and worries. The 2 elders who were tasked to go to the 10,000 Demon Alliance looked at Xiang at the same time. Their eyes and their expressions were clearly asking bloody death if they were still going to the Myriad Demon Alliance to ask for peace. Xiang waved his hand and ordered the 4 elders, "All of you can leave. Leave this place to this king." "Patriarch, you can't do that." The 4 elders were shocked and quickly tried to dissuade him. Long Tian clearly came with ill intentions. "How can we abandon you? Patriarch, don't worry. He's only one person. No matter how strong he is, he can't defeat so many of us." The 4 elders were united against a common enemy and were determined not to retreat. On the other hand, Tianxing, who held the Heaven Barrier sword, didn't say a word from beginning to end. He just quietly watched this scene with a mocking smile hanging on the corners of his mouth. Probably in his opinion, Xiang and the elders were acting again. In the end, Xiang took out the dignity of the patriarch. The 4 elders could only obey and leave uneasily. With the exit as the center within a radius of 50,000 miles, only Tianxing and Xiang were left. It was not until this time that Tianxing spoke. He looked at Xiang and said with a faint smile, "It seems that you know very well why I'm here." There was no one else nearby, so Xiang no longer pretended. He smiled bitterly and nodded, "Of course. You're going to settle accounts later. It's already within my expectations. In fact, I've been worried about this every day for the past year. I thought you would come long ago, but I didn't expect you to wait a year." Tianxing said calmly, "After that battle ended, I wasn't injured." Xiang was stunned for a moment before he suddenly understood. He smiled bitterly and said, "So that's how it is. It seems that you gave me a chance and gave me a year to think about it. However, I gave up the chance myself." Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, "You're not willing to give up Nebula Paradise and you don't want to take your clansmen away from home?" Xiang nodded and admitted, "Yes. After all, the Xianxia clan has lived here for more than 20,000 years and has long regarded this place as their home. How can we give it up so easily? Moreover, the Xianxia clan is notorious. If we leave Starsource Continent, where can we find shelter?" Tianxing nodded slightly and asked again, "So, you who have always been afraid of death are not afraid of death this time?" Xiang shook his head and said seriously, "Correction, I cherish my life, but I'm not afraid of death." Tianxing didn't dwell on this question and asked again, "Looking at your actions today, you want to use your life in exchange for the survival of the Xianxia clan. This is my last resort. I hope you can help me." Xiang said with a serious face, "Just treat it as me begging you." Tianxing sneered and shook his head, "It's no use begging me. I can't promise you. As for whether or not I want to eliminate the Xianxia clan, it's up to them." Without waiting for him to finish, Xiang said firmly, "I've already left a will. They are not allowed to take revenge for me, and they are not allowed to become enemies with the Myriad Demon Alliance." Tianxing smiled, "You've thought it through. Unfortunately, after you die, it's hard to say whether they will listen to your orders." Xiang didn't deny this, but his expression and eyes were a little bitter. After a moment of silence, he looked at Tianxing and asked bitterly, "Long Tian, because of Tao Yongxing of the Taotai clan, I provoked you. But I asked myself, you have always had the upper hand and I have been defeated time and time again, but I have never really harmed the interests of you and the Myriad Demon Alliance. There is no blood feud between us and I have already backed down to this point. Can't we reconcile? I've already sworn a heavenly oath that I will never attack you in this life. Do you really want to kill me?" Tianxing said expressionlessly, "You have been asking for peace with the Myriad Demon Alliance and I already know about it. But it's useless. You should have thought of this when you joined the Xuanji Grotto. Although you've already sworn a heavenly oath that you will not attack me, it doesn't mean that you won't threaten the Myriad Demon Alliance. It's impossible for me to trust someone as treacherous and cunning as you." So you can only die. But I understand. After confirming that there was no way out, Xianxia didn't have any hope. He sneered bitterly, "You want to kill me and I can't fight back because of the heavenly oath. I can only take it. Also, even if you kill me, the Xianxia clan may not be able to survive, right?" Translator. Transin Editor. Transin. Chapter 3803. If someone who did not know the truth heard Xianxia's words, they would feel extremely wronged and resentful. Yes, because of the heavenly oath he could not fight back even if Tianxing wanted to kill him. Even if he sacrificed his own life, he could not guarantee the survival of the Xianxia tribe. However, he could not fight back against Tianxing and the 10,000 Demon Alliance. No matter how one looked at it, he would die of grievance. However, in reality, those who knew the cause and Xianxia's nature did not think there was anything wrong with it. At least Xianxia deserved to die. He could not blame anyone else. One thing was for sure. If Tianxing did not kill him, Xianxia would definitely attack again when the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor returned and the 10,000 Demon Alliance was in danger. He just couldn't attack Tianxing. It wasn't like he couldn't deal with the Myriad Demon League. Everything Tianxing did was for the 10,000 Demon Alliance to control the Starsource continent. This was exactly what he did not want to see. Therefore Xianxia had to die. In the past year, if I was not afraid of that stupid heavenly oath, I would have been free long ago. Xianxia, who knew that he was going to die, lost his concern and fear. His eyes were red and he laughed crazily. I was afraid of the heavenly Tao and did not dare to try it. Since I'm destined to die, then I'd like to see if the so-called oath to the Tao of the heavens will come true. Will the heavenly Tao, which is said to be omnipresent, care about such a small thing and such a stupid oath? Xianxia laughed as he took out his divine saber, armor and indestructible golden body. He was also crazily accumulating divine power in his body. His battle intent was high and he looked up at the sky with a ferocious expression. He released his battle intent without restraint. Tianxing looked at him calmly and slowly raised the sword of burial of heaven. He said, "Whether the heavenly oath will come true or not, you will not be spared. If you have said your last words, let's begin." As he spoke, the divine power in his body reached its peak, and a strong battle intent burst out from his body. Go to hell. When Xianxia's divine power condensed to the peak, a surging murderous aura erupted. He let out a loud roar and slashed at Tianxing with his divine saber. He slashed out a few dark red saber lights that were as red as blood. At the same time, Patriarch Xianxi's indestructible golden body turned into a dazzling golden light and merged with his body. With the support of the indestructible golden body, his strength had doubled and his defense was almost invincible. It was precisely because of this that he seemed to have gone mad. He recklessly charged towards Tianxing, bursting forth with an indomitable momentum. Tianxing naturally wouldn't underestimate his opponent. He punched out a dragon elephant divine fist with his left hand, while his right hand waved his sword, creating a sky full of golden light. Sun-shattering sword. Dozens of dazzling golden sword lights collided with Xianxia's saber lights, causing a series of muffled sounds to erupt. At the same time, the mountain-like dragon elephant fist shadow also hit Xianxia. With a loud bang, Xianxia was sent flying by the punch and smashed into the ground 100 miles away. With the protection of the indestructible golden body, he didn't suffer any substantial damage. However, he was severely shaken and his divine power was a little chaotic. His aura was also much weaker. He had just smashed into the ground, creating a huge crater. Before he could fly back to the sky to counterattack, Tianxing had already taken out the primordial chaos bell and suppressed him from the sky. Swoosh! The 1-foot-tall divine bell instantly expanded by 1,000,000,000 times, turning into a sky screen with a radius of 30,000 miles, sealing off the area. The entire space within 30,000 miles was sealed and it became pitch black. An immense and irresistible force instantly poured down and firmly locked onto Xianxia. Xianxia's body suddenly stiffened, and it became very difficult for him to move. His combat power also decreased greatly. Seeing that his surroundings had fallen into darkness, he struggled to fly into the sky and looked around. The primordial chaos bell? You have already refined it? Xianxia was no stranger to the primordial chaos bell. He immediately recognized it and his face was filled with shock and anxiety. He knew very well that the primordial chaos spell of the Taotai clan was no weaker than Patriarch Xianxia's indestructible golden body. In fact, in a battle, the primordial chaos spell could play a far greater role than the indestructible golden body. Being in the primordial chaos spell, even the power of the indestructible golden body would be weakened. As for his combat power, it would be greatly weakened. As a result, his advantage of having a supreme-grade king-level divine artifact was completely gone. Under the suppression of the primordial chaos spell, he was not confident that he could remain undefeated and undying. Since you know the power of the primordial chaos spell, then you will be killed. Ji Tianqing shouted coldly. Holding the sword of burial of heaven with both hands, he charged toward Xueshang like a thunderbolt, tearing the night sky apart. Xueshang was shocked and quickly blocked with the divine saber in front of him. Bam! With a muffled sound, Xueshang was once again sent flying by the sword. He retreated 800 miles and fell into the darkness. The indestructible golden body that had merged with his divine body flashed with golden divine light and emitted the sound of metal rubbing against each other. Seeing that Ji Tianqing did not stop at all in the night sky, he stabbed with the sword again. Xueshang did not have time to check if the indestructible golden body was damaged. He forcibly mobilized his chaotic divine power and quickly dodged. Clang! The sword light that was as bright as stars brushed past him, but at the critical moment, it changed direction and hit his chest hard. With a loud sound of metal clashing, the violent impact sent Xueshang tumbling backward. The sword of burial of heaven had also cut a hole in the armor he was wearing. Damn it! Fighting in the primordial chaos spell, my strength is weakened, but he is not affected at all. He is too fast. I can't dodge at all. This thought flashed through Xueshang's mind, and his heart was both painful and heavy. Although he was protected by the indestructible golden body, Ji Tianqing's movement technique was too fast, and his sword technique was even faster. Every time Ji Tianqing attacked, he could not dodge and could only rely on the indestructible golden body to resist. Once, twice, 3 or 5 times was fine, but if it was more than 100 times, he knew that he would not be able to withstand it. Even if the indestructible golden body could be preserved, he would be covered in wounds and his divine power would be extremely weak. No, I can't just dodge. I have to fight back. Even if I die in battle, even if I am killed, I can't die in such a cowardly way. Xueshang roared in his heart and made up his mind. Even if he was killed by Ji Tianqing, he would bite off a few pieces of his flesh. When Ji Tianqing swung his sword again, he looked at the sword light that filled the sky and stopped dodging. Instead, he waved his divine saber to meet it. Silent blood soul-breaking slash. Xueshang roared and waved his divine saber with both hands. He used all his strength to slash out 49 blood-colored saber lights. Not only did he explode with his strongest divine power, but he also used more than 150 types of divine power. This was almost his strongest killing move. However, the outcome made him extremely sad and helpless. Bang! Bang bang bang! In the earth-shattering sound, the blood-colored saber lights were all defeated. More than a dozen sword lights hit him and he was sent flying again, blood spurting out of his 7 orifices. Chapter 3804. The exit of the Nebula Grotto was covered by the primordial chaos spell. Looking from afar, one could only see a gigantic pitch-black divine bell pressing down on the ground. The 4 elders were ordered to leave by Xueshang, but they did not go far, nor did they return to the Xianxia clan's lair. They believed that Long Tian came with ill intentions and would definitely harm clan leader Xueshang. Therefore the 4 of them retreated 50,000 miles and stopped in the sky. They stood high in the sky and used their divine consciousness to observe the situation at the grotto's exit. Unfortunately, they could only see the gigantic divine bell and could not see what was going on inside. Worried, the 4 elders sent a message to their clansmen. Not long after, a large group of deacons and guards rushed over in a hurry. There were also 300 elites of the Hall of Blood Slaughter. They were armed with swords and full of killing intent. These elites of the Hall of Blood Slaughter did not listen to the 4 elders' message. They followed Xueshang's order and went to check the situation at the exit. However, when they encountered the 4 elders, they were stopped by them. Don't go. The clan leader has ordered that no one can interfere. The second elder stopped the elites of the Hall of Blood Slaughter and said to the leader of the Hall of Blood Slaughter. The leader of the Hall of Blood Slaughter frowned and used his divine consciousness to look at the divine bell at the exit. He asked worriedly, Second elder, what's going on? Who is so daring as to attack our nebula paradise? The third elder replied in a heavy tone, it's Long Tian of the Myriad Demon Alliance. What? Long Tian? The leader of the Hall of Blood Slaughter was shocked and said anxiously, damn bastard, he actually led the Myriad Demon Alliance to attack our clan? What are we waiting for? Go help the clan leader. As he spoke, the leader of the Hall of Blood Slaughter was about to lead 300 elites to the exit to help. The other two elders quickly stopped him and explained, don't be so agitated. It's only Long Tian who came. He didn't bring any helpers. Also, the clan leader has strictly ordered that we are not allowed to interfere in this matter. He will deal with it alone. The second elder nodded in agreement and said earnestly, the clan leader said that this is between him and Long Tian. No matter what happens, our clansmen are not allowed to interfere. Otherwise, this matter will become a grudge between our clan and the Myriad Demon Alliance and bring disaster to our clan. At this point, not only were the 300 elites of the Blood Slaughter Hall stunned, but the dozen deacons and more than 100 experts were also stunned. How can this be? What grudge is there between the clan leader and Long Tian? The Myriad Demon Alliance dared to attack the Xuanji Grotto and even won. It's obvious how powerful they are. Our clan is no match for them. But if that's the case, wouldn't the patriarch have to sacrifice himself to protect all the disciples of our clan? The hundreds of disciples of the Xianxia tribe immediately understood Xueshang's intention. Therefore, many people who were worried about Xueshang's safety immediately began to clamor. How can we let the patriarch risk his life while we drag out an ignoble existence? We would rather die in battle than suffer such humiliation. My clansmen, as long as you still have courage, come with me. We will fight side by side with the clan leader. We will not yield to the enemy. Someone raised his arm and shouted. Immediately, the others responded and rushed to the primordial bell of chaos with more than 200 people. Even the commander of the Blood Slaughter Hall ignored Xueshang's orders and rushed over with 300 elites of the Blood Slaughter Hall. The three elders wanted to stop the impulsive clansmen from ruining the clan leader's plan. However, the second elder waved his hand and stopped the three elders. The three elders were filled with anxiety and hurriedly asked him, Second elder, what are you doing? The clan leader has ordered that no one is allowed to interfere in this matter. Why don't you stop them? They are so reckless. What if they ruin the clan leader's plan? What should we do? Seeing that the three elders were so anxious, the second elder said earnestly, Everyone, don't be anxious. How could I not think the same? However, as you can see, our clansmen are hot-blooded. They can't bear to see the clan leader sacrifice himself for the safety of our clan. We can't stop them. If we forcefully suppress them, I'm afraid we will be labeled as cowardly, cold-hearted, and cowardly. The three elders fell silent. They had to admit that the second elder was right. After a while, an elder asked, What should we do now? The second elder looked at the exit. His divine sense found that everyone was surrounding the divine bell. He sighed and said, Now that things have come to this, we can only go and take a look. Thus, the four elders flew across the sky and rushed to the grotto heaven's exit. Soon the four of them arrived near the divine bell. They saw hundreds of Xianxia clan experts and Hall of Blood Slaughter elites surrounding the divine bell, observing and discussing. No one could see the situation inside the divine bell, but everyone's face was filled with worry. Everyone knew that Long Tian was an expert who could be compared to a peak divine king. Their clan leader was definitely not Long Tian's match. However, no matter how everyone worried, it was also useless. They could not help at all. Some people who were more impatient took out divine weapons and swords one after another, hacking and slashing wildly at the divine bell. In the end, everyone was tired until they were panting heavily. Divine weapons and swords all collapsed, but the divine bell did not budge an inch. For some time, everyone could only stare at each other, cursing loudly at the divine bell, but they were at a loss on what to do. Seeing the scene become rowdy, many clansmen surged with rage, their behavior somewhat out of control. The second elder hurriedly came forward to suppress it. Everyone quiet down. Make sure not to have any rash and impulsive actions, so as to avoid spoiling the clan leader's grand plan. The clan leader and Long Tian are inside the divine bell. We can't see the situation inside and can't help either. Everyone being anxious is also useless. Rather than that, Everyone might as well conserve energy and wait patiently for the result. You all have to believe in the clan leader's ability. Since he has the confidence, he can definitely resolve it smoothly. Following the second elder's voice spreading all around, many anxious and frenzied clansmen gradually calmed down. Through several elders' pacification and persuasion again, the scene finally recovered calm. Several hundred people surrounded the divine bell's surroundings, patiently waiting for the result. This was also something that could not be helped. After all, the struggle between pinnacle divine king powerhouses was not what these divine lords could intervene in. Time passed by silently. After 15 minutes, the divine bell suddenly shrunk 1,000,000,000,000 times and flew back in front of Xianxia. The massive shadow that was like the canopy of the sky finally disappeared. The world within a radius of 30,000 miles appeared in front of everyone once more. But when everyone saw the scene inside clearly, they were stunned on the spot. It was only to see the area within a radius of 30,000 miles become scorched earth. The earth was covered with ravines and deep pits. There were still remnants of horrifying divine power undulations. Above the ruins, there was only a handsome and valiant youth in white robes. There was no trace of Xianxia. Book Guest Residence Reading Website. Chapter 3805. Xianxia stood above the ruins holding the Burial of Heaven sword in his hand, safe and sound. Xianxia, on the other hand, had disappeared. Apparently he had turned into ashes and completely died. This result was destined from the beginning. That year, before Xianxia became a high-level god king, he could fight Xianxia to a draw or even slightly better. Now that he was an 8th-stage god king, he could even defeat a peak god king, so killing Xianxia was naturally not a problem. When he killed Xianxia, he did not even use his 2 trump cards, Absolute Shadows and Sword of Annihilation. The reason why it took 15 minutes was that the indestructible golden body was more difficult to deal with. If it were not for the indestructible golden body's defense being too strong, Xianxia could kill Xianxia within 10 moves. What was worth mentioning was that Xianxia's method of killing Xianxia mainly relied on soul attacks. It was very difficult for ordinary spells to break the defense of the indestructible golden body. Even if Xianxia had already killed Xianxia, the indestructible golden body was actually only damaged and not destroyed. Before putting away the primordial chaos spell, Xianxia had already cleaned up the battlefield. Xianxia turned into ashes and merged into the ruins. His godhead fragments, interspatial ring and indestructible golden body were all put into Xianxia's interspatial ring. Xianxia pondered that he would have to find time to repair the damaged indestructible golden body in the future. It could also be used as a trump card. After all, it was a king-level divine artifact. 4 elders, 300 elites of the Blood Slaughter Hall, and hundreds of experts of the Xianxia clan swept their eyes across the ruins of the battlefield and finally gathered on Xianxia. There was no need for Xianxia to say anything, everyone already knew the result. Immediately, anger and sadness spread among the crowd, filling everyone's heart. Many people's eyes turned red with blood, and flames of anger burst out of their bodies, exuding blazing killing intent. Some people clenched their weapons and the divine power in their bodies crazily accumulated, ready to burst out a fatal blow at any time. The 300 elites of the Blood Slaughter Hall moved their feet and silently formed an encirclement around Xianxia. Although there was no sound in the field, the atmosphere was particularly solemn and somber. Raging anger and killing intent were brewing and it was about to erupt. However, Xianxia, who was in the eye of the storm, was not worried at all. In fact, he didn't even care about these hundreds of people. His expression was calm as he said, "There's no need to guess. Your clan leader Xianxia has already been killed by this king. Just now he had ordered the elders to strictly forbid anyone from interfering in this matter. Furthermore, he had left a will that forbade the people of the Xianxia tribe from avenging him or becoming enemies with the 10,000 Demon Alliance. This is Xianxia's order. Now that he is dead, you can choose to obey or disobey." Everyone was already filled with grief and indignation, and his words had undoubtedly added fuel to the fire, causing everyone to be even more furious. However, he didn't care at all and continued, "I believe you also understand why Xianxia did this. He wanted to sacrifice himself to protect the people of the Xianxia tribe. Before he died, he even begged this king to spare the Xianxia tribe. This was because he knew that it would be easy for this king and the 10,000 Demon Alliance to exterminate the Xianxia tribe. However, this king did not agree to his request. Whether or not to destroy the Xianxia tribe is up to this king. Of course, it also depends on your performance. Ji Tianxing's tone was very relaxed and indifferent. There wasn't a trace of guilt, anger, or overbearingness in his voice. It was as if he was describing an unrelated matter. After he finished speaking, he stood with his sword and didn't say anything else. Obviously, he had given the Xianxia tribe the choice. It was up to them whether they would live or be destroyed. The leader of the blood slaughter hall was the most loyal to Zhou Xian. When he heard Ji Tianxing's words, he could no longer suppress his anger and immediately roared. Long Tian, the Xianxia tribe will never forgive you. Others may be afraid of you in the 10,000 Demon Alliance, but I'm not afraid of you. With the leader of the blood slaughter hall taking the lead, a few deacons and many other tribe members immediately responded. Many people were filled with righteous indignation and cursed furiously. Long Tian, you bastard, not only did you kill our leader but you're also showing off here. Do you really think the Xianxia tribe is a coward? Even if we die here, we won't be humiliated by you. Brothers, let's attack together and fight it out with him. As the roars, and curses rang out, everyone's emotions and hot blood were ignited. Nearly 400 Kenshin soldiers waved their swords and roared as they charged toward Ji Tianxing, releasing an overwhelming number of swords and sabers. Immediately, the flames of war rose from the ruins and killing intent soared to the sky. The four elders' faces changed immediately, and they anxiously shouted, wanting to stop the crowd. Of course, they knew that the rash actions of these 400 tribe members would lead to a disaster. However, it was too late for them to stop them. Those 400 people were on the verge of madness and did not listen to any advice. Ji Tianxing was about to be drowned by the sword and saber light that blotted out the sky. At this moment, the center of the battlefield, under the swords and sabers, suddenly released a dazzling golden sword light that soared into the sky like a blazing sun. Bang! 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 Hundreds of divine sword lights, carrying the mighty power of laws, bloomed in the sky like a blazing sun, illuminating the earth. The attacks of the 400 Xianxia tribe members were like ice and snow, quickly melting and dissipating under the blazing sun. With an earth-shattering explosion, dozens of blood slaughter hall elites disappeared on the spot, turning into a rain of blood and dust that fell to the ground. Hundreds of Xianxia tribe members were also sent flying by the unparalleled power and crashed into the ruins. In the dazzling golden light, Ji Tianxing's figure reappeared, standing proudly high in the sky. His left palm struck out with a mountain-sized dragon-elephant image, and his right hand swung the sword, creating streaks of shooting stars that shot toward the fleeing Xianxia tribe members. Bang! 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 Boom! Boom! The battlefield was in chaos. The 300 or so Xianxia tribe members who were lucky enough to survive were thrown off their feet, their flesh and blood flying everywhere. Waves of screams and howls of despair rang out continuously, reverberating through the sky. In just a few seconds, nearly half of the Xianxia tribe members were killed. The four elders witnessed all this with their own eyes, and they were so frightened that their faces turned pale and they trembled all over. Of course, it was not just shock but more anger and fear. They knew that Long Tian was very powerful, comparable to a peak god king. However, they had never seen it with their own eyes, and they were not qualified to exchange blows with Long Tian. Now that they saw it with their own eyes, they knew that Long Tian was actually so powerful. Let alone killing 400 Xianxia tribe members, even destroying the entire Nebula Grotto heaven with his own strength would not be a problem. At this moment, the four elders suddenly understood Zhou Xian's good intentions. They originally had a slight impulse to attack Long Tian together. But now that impulsive flame had been forcibly extinguished by them. They shouted, "Stop!" While begging Ji Tianxing for mercy, they tried to save the fleeing Xianxia clansmen. Chapter 3806. This battle erupted suddenly and ended quickly as well. After 10 breaths, the Xianxia tribe stopped fighting. The remaining 100 or so clansmen were all heavily injured and gathered together to catch their breaths. Many of them were in a sorry state. Their robes were stained with blood and their hair was disheveled. They glared at Ji Tianxing in the sky. Their eyes were filled with hatred and fear, but no one dared to attack. After all, Ji Tianxing had killed more than 200 experts in just a few breaths. Most of them were the elites of the blood slaughter hall. The surviving Xianxia tribe members knew that compared to Long Tian, they were like dust compared to a star. For Ji Tianxing, dealing with them was as easy as chopping vegetables. No matter how hot-blooded and fearless they were, there was no need for them to die for nothing. The four elders stood between them and Ji Tianxing. They kept bowing to Ji Tianxing and begging for mercy. Although they looked very humble, sorry, and humiliated, there was nothing they could do. This was the punishment for being impulsive. If they did not beg for mercy, Ji Tianxing would kill them all. The entire nebula cave would be destroyed. For the sake of the big picture and the continuation of the Xianxia tribe, the four elders could only endure the humiliation and try their best to mediate and make peace. Ji Tianxing looked coldly at the four elders. After a long time, he put away the sword of burial of heaven and said, "Life or death is the choice of the Xianxia tribe. With the Xianxia tribe's fierce reputation, even if I kill all of you and destroy the nebula cave, it is only right. However, seeing that Zhou Xian sacrificed himself to protect you, and that you know what's good for you, I will not send you to reunite with the Taotai tribe." Seeing that he finally put away the sword and promised not to kill the Xianxia tribe, the four elders felt as if they had been pardoned. They quickly bowed and thanked him. However, this matter was not over yet. Ji Tianxing said, "But I know that the Xianxia tribe has always been bloodthirsty and good at fighting. If I let you go so easily today, it will be a disaster. In the future, you will definitely become the enemy of the Demon Alliance. Therefore, in order to avoid future troubles, we have to make an agreement." The four elders looked at each other and understood that Ji Tianxing's words were reasonable, so they didn't object to it. In their minds, they were simply being forced to swear that they would not go against the 10,000 Demon Alliance in the future. With the 10,000 Demon Alliance's current power, the Xianxia clan could not wait to hide. How would they dare to make trouble? Therefore, the four elders did not hesitate and immediately agreed. "Longtian, don't worry. Patriarch Zhou Xian left us a dying order. We will certainly obey it and not go against the 10,000 Demon Alliance. As long as you let the Xianxia clan go, it doesn't matter even if we swear an oath. Longtian, we can swear that we will not go against the 10,000 Demon Alliance, but you have to fulfill your promise and stop harassing us." Ji Tianxing glanced at them and said coldly, "It's not as simple as you think. Take me to your divine palace." The four elders were stunned for a moment. They were a little puzzled, not knowing what Ji Tianxing wanted to do. However, the Xianxia clan was in a very passive situation now. Their survival was in Ji Tianxing's hands. The four elders had no right to refuse, nor did they have the courage to bargain. They could only obey. Therefore they took Ji Tianxing and flew into the depths of the grotto heaven. The 100 Xianxia clan members who were in a sorry state could only follow. Not long after, they returned to the Xianxia clan's residence. This place was surrounded by mountains in all directions. The divine power of heaven and earth was very rich. Within a radius of 5,000 miles, there were ancient and solemn palaces built on each of the majestic mountains. There were more than 4,000 Xianxia clan members living in more than 200 palaces and courtyards. In the center of this area, surrounded by many palaces, there was a blood-colored divine palace that was hundreds of feet tall that was the most eye-catching. That was Patriarch Zhou Xian's residence. It was also the core of the Xianxia clan, where the records were kept and where they discussed matters. When Ji Tianxing and the four elders flew above the divine palace, a large number of Xianxia clan members had already gathered around. Not long ago, the news that an enemy had attacked the Nebula Grotto Heaven had spread in the clan. Thousands of Xianxia clan members were alarmed. They gathered together and discussed worriedly. If it weren't for a few respected elders and 2 elders suppressing them, the Xianxia clan members would have already charged toward the exit in a grandiose manner. At this moment, the 3,000 Xianxia clan members were divided into more than a dozen groups. They were discussing and shouting noisily. When they saw Ji Tianxing and the 4 elders return, the Xianxia clan members quieted down. They looked at Ji Tianxing with hostility, although they did not know what had happened. However, everyone was extremely wary and hostile towards this young man from the Dragon clan. Soon, the 100 Xianxia clan members who were in a sorry state returned to the vicinity of the divine palace. When the Xianxia clan members saw their miserable state, they immediately exclaimed in shock. Many of them asked what had happened. The injured Xianxia clan members all had expressions of grief and shame. They did not say a word. The heavy and strange atmosphere made the 3,000 Xianxia clan members uneasy. The discussion in the crowd became louder. Everyone looked at Ji Tianxing with even more hostility. Their eyes were filled with hatred and hostility. Many of the bolder Xianxia clan members questioned the four elders loudly about what had happened. The four elders were hesitant. Their expressions were ugly. They secretly discussed how to explain and appease the angry Xianxia clan members. However, before they could come to a conclusion, Tianxing ordered, "Go and call everyone over. Gather them at the square in front of the divine palace. If anyone dares to not come, kill them." The four elders' hearts shook. Their expressions were even uglier. However, they did not dare to refute and could only pass down the order. Under the orders of the elders and a dozen deacons, the 3,000 Xianxia clan members unwillingly gathered at the square. The square in front of the divine palace was very big. It was at least 1,000 feet wide. There was no problem in accommodating the 4,000 Xianxia clan members. The patience of the Xianxia clan members was gradually running out. Their anger and killing intent were becoming more and more undisguised. They could explode at any moment. Many people were roaring and questioning loudly. However, the elders could not explain. Tianxing was also silent and expressionless. Half an hour later, more than 1,000 Xianxia race clansmen gathered from all directions. The second elder reported to Tianxing, "There are 4,562 people in total. Almost all of our clansmen have gathered." Tianxing turned to look at him and sneered, "Almost all? How many are missing?" The second elder was under great pressure. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead as he replied, "There are still 15 people who are missing." "Haha, so missing?" Tianxing sneered and said, "Nebula Paradise has always been sealed. They cannot leave. Since we have not found them, then they must be hiding. However, no matter. This king will deal with them later." Chapter 3807. Of course, the second elder knew what Tianxing meant by deal with. He was even clearer that the 6 young experts who fled without permission only had the strength of Divine Lord Realm. To Long Tian, killing those 6 young experts was no different from killing a few ants. However, at this moment the second elder was not in the mood to worry about those 6 people. He was more worried about what Long Tian wanted to do by gathering all the Xianxia tribe members in the plaza. Before he could think further, he saw Long Tian emit a divine aura that could suppress the heavens and the earth. It enveloped the plaza. Swoosh. All of a sudden, the 4,000 or so Xianxia clansmen all turned pale and lowered their heads in fear. All the roars, questions, and discussions came to an abrupt end. The plaza that had been noisy a moment ago was now so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Although many Xianxia tribe members felt humiliated and angry, they could not raise their heads. Under the terrifying divine aura, they could not even raise their heads, let alone make a sound. Then they heard Tianxing say coldly, "Your tribe leader Xianxia has been killed by me." Before he died, he left behind his last words. It was the same words as before. He had said it once at the entrance of the grotto heaven. Now he said it again in front of all the Xianxia tribe members. The outcome was the same. The 4,000 Xianxia tribe members felt like they had been struck by lightning. When they heard that Xianxia had been killed, they were filled with grief and anger. Their eyes were filled with hatred and resentment. If looks could kill, Tianxing would have been cut into pieces. However, he was not afraid at all. He ignored the murderous looks and said indifferently, "To avoid future trouble, all of you have to swear an oath now. Of course, the choice is in your hands whether or not you want to swear an oath. You can resist." As soon as he finished speaking, more than a dozen divine lords struggled to break free from the pressure and shouted angrily, "Long Tian, we are irreconcilable with you. You damn bastard, you killed our tribe leader. We want you to pay with your life. Everyone, don't be afraid. If we all work together, we can definitely kill him." The dozen or so experts were agitated and roared furiously. Tianxing glanced at them indifferently, then raised his right hand and shot out a dozen golden beams. In the next moment, a series of muffled bangs could be heard. The dozen or so divine lord experts exploded in front of everyone, turning into a bloody mist. The sudden deaths and the thick stench of blood greatly irritated the 4,000 Xianxia clansmen. Many people became even more furious. They roared like crazy and rushed to Tianxing with resentful eyes. There were even many experts who roared and revealed their true forms, using their Xianxia true forms to unleash their strongest power to attack Tianxing. Tianxing's expression didn't change. He didn't even lift his eyelids. He raised his hand again and shot out dozens of sword lights. Swish, swish. A resplendent golden sword light tore through the air, and in the next instant, the dozens of Xianxia experts exploded into a bloody mist. A full 46 Divine Lord Realm experts all burst forth with their strongest power under their rage. In the end, he was still unable to block a single attack from Tianxing and was easily killed by him. Moreover, not even his corpse was left behind. Not even a speck of his remains remained. Such a shocking scene filled the 4,000 Xianxia clansmen with fear. They were scared out of their wits. In an instant, the cursing and roaring on the square weakened a lot. Countless people's ferocious expressions and resentful eyes turned into deep fear. As Xianxia clansmen, they were naturally bloodthirsty. However, this didn't mean that they were fearless and could ignore death. The bloody reality told them that Long Tian was unimaginably powerful and that they couldn't disobey him. Long Tian could kill them as easily as squashing an ant. Therefore, many Xianxia clansmen suppressed their anger and stayed where they were, not daring to move. However, there were still more than 100 fearless ironheads who continued to roar and charge at Tianxing. However, a few elders and a dozen deacons rushed over anxiously and chased them back to the square. Those who could be comforted were comforted. Those who couldn't be comforted could only be knocked out on the spot to calm them down. Of course, there were still more than 30 Xianxia clansmen who charged out of the square fearlessly and charged at Tianxing. However, their outcome was the same as the Xianxia clansmen before. They were all killed by Tianxing with a raise of his hand and turned into a bloody mist. After a brutal beating, the remaining 4,000 people finally became obedient. In the face of absolute strength, they could only accept their fate and suppress all their anger and humiliation. The elders and deacons took the opportunity to comfort the crowd and explain what happened. In short, the square was noisy for a while before it became quiet again. Tianxing took out a few jade slips and handed them to the 4 elders. He instructed, "This is the model of the oath. Copy it and send it out. Everyone has to recite it." The 4 elders were a little confused and looked at each other. They were just swearing not to go against the 10,000 Demon Alliance. Did they need a model? However, they didn't dare to disobey Tianxing. They quickly took the jade slips and copied the contents of the jade slips. When they saw the contents of the model oath, they were dumbfounded again. They finally understood why this oath needed a model. There were more than 20 rules and more than 500 words. Normal people couldn't remember them. The 4 elders were very efficient. They quickly made 18 copies of the model oath and handed them to the 18 deacons. Then they and the 18 deacons stood in the sky and commanded the Xianxia clansmen on the square to recite the oath one by one. The first batch of 22 Xianxia clansmen who were forced to swear the oath had wonderful expressions when they received the jade slips and read the contents of the oath. The smart ones knew that this was a heavenly oath. It was very strict and detailed. There was nothing left out. If they really swore such an oath, they would never be able to do anything to the 10,000 Demon Alliance. They couldn't go against the 10,000 Demon Alliance openly, secretly, or even in a roundabout way. If they had any thoughts of going against the 10,000 Demon Alliance, they might even be punished by the heavens. This was too terrifying. However, Tianxing was staring at them from the sky. No one dared to refuse the oath. Everyone knew the consequences of going against Tianxing. Therefore, the 22 Xianxia clansmen fell silent for a while. Then they began to recite the oath with a tragic and humiliating mood. Soon, a scene that shocked the thousands of Xianxia clansmen appeared. After the 22 people recited the oath, their bodies lit up with 5-colored divine light and traces of Daoist rhymes. An invisible power of the heavens enveloped the square. Everyone was terrified and in awe. Chapter 3808. The Dao runes and scenes of the 22 Xianxia tribe members swearing could not be compared to the divine king war whale. Even the fluctuations of the power of the heavenly Dao and the scene of the lingering Dao aura seemed much weaker and insignificant. Tianxing guessed that the difference was related to their cultivation level. The heavenly Dao would definitely pay more attention to a peak expert like the divine king war whale. The heavenly Dao was already giving them a lot of face by responding to the Xianxia tribe members. If not for the fact that Tianxing had given them a strict and formal oath, the Xianxia tribe members would not have been able to elicit a response from the heavenly Dao. The scene of the first batch of Xianxia tribe members swearing shocked more than 4,000 Xianxia tribe members and made them even more respectful. Although the square was still quiet and dull, it was obvious that everyone's resistance was much lower. Next, the first batch of Xianxia tribe members returned to their original positions. The second batch of Xianxia tribe members flew into the sky and recited the heavenly Dao oath in the jade slip. Tianxing stood in the sky above the square and looked at everything indifferently. As time passed, batch after batch of Xianxia tribe members swore the heavenly Dao oath, triggering the 5-colored divine light and Dao runes. The heavenly Dao power in the sky above the square became denser and denser, making the Xianxia tribe members more and more respectful. The heavenly Dao today was a little busy. Overall, the collective swearing of the Xianxia tribe members went smoothly. Most of the Xianxia tribe members were intimidated by Tianxing's power and could only swear obediently. However, there were still a few Xianxia tribe members who stubbornly refused to swear. These people were either too young and hot-blooded or too old. The respected elders in the tribe could not bring themselves to do it. In any case, Tianxing did not waste any time and killed them instantly. After this small interlude, the rest of the matter went even more smoothly. Even so, it took 6 hours for all 4,000 Xianxia clan members to finish swearing their oaths. Tianxing monitored the entire process to ensure that no one was left out. Only after the 18 deacons and 4 elders had sworn their oaths did he turn around and leave. The remaining matters were naturally left to the elders and wardens. The resentment of thousands of clansmen was too great. They still needed to explain and comfort them. Tianxing did not leave the nebula cave. Instead, he searched the cave once more. The 6 Xianxia clan experts who had fled in advance and were hiding in various places were also found and killed by him. After dealing with these matters, he left the Nebula Paradise. After the Nebula Grotto suffered such a calamity, it would definitely be turbulent for a few days before it could calm down. At the same time, the Xianxia clan lost their clan leader and a large number of elites. They would not be able to recover for the next 1,000 years. Bound by the oath, even if the Xianxias grew stronger in another tens of thousands of years, they would not be able to harm the 10,000 Demon Alliance. Of course, the Xianxia clan was an ancient sinful clan. It was hard to say if they could survive for tens of thousands of years. No matter how powerful the myriad Demon Alliance was right now, it was still unknown whether it would still exist after tens of thousands of years. At the very least, the Xianxias would not be able to cause any trouble or threaten the 10,000 Demon Alliance in the next few thousand years. Meanwhile, in the southernmost part of the Star Source continent, on an island near the boundless sky sea, swoosh, 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 more than a dozen dazzling divine lights descended from the sky and landed on the strange rocky island. After the divine lights faded, 18 different-looking divine beings of different races appeared. These 18 powerful divine spirits with unfathomable auras were all divine king realm experts. However, they were not of the demon race. They were of a different race that did not exist in the dragon realm. There was a divine being with blue skin and antennae on top of his head. There was a divine being with a lithe body and a beautiful and noble appearance like that of a fairy. There was also a divine being with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a white Pegasus. There was also a strange divine being with a body that was like a ball of black smoke that was constantly changing. All in all, the 18 God King experts could be divided into 7 different races. The 18 God Kings gathered together, looked at each other, and exchanged a few words through voice transmission. Then they all flew toward the pile of rocks in the middle of the island. On the surface, this island looked barren. Even the sea beasts and flying birds were not willing to stay here. However, in reality, they had already built a stone cave in the center of the island a month ago and made it look like a palace. And the hidden entrance to the palace was in the pile of rocks. The 18 God Kings came to the pile of rocks. Someone used a divine technique and opened the array at the entrance. Soon, a white spatial door appeared. The 18 God Kings entered in a single file. After a while, they appeared in the center of the island, 3,000 meters underground. The group passed through a man-made tunnel and entered a brightly lit stone cave. Although the stone cave was dug at the last minute, it was decorated magnificently and shone with divine light. The whitest stone cave in the center was the main hall where they discussed matters with their master. On the walls on both sides of the main hall, there were more than 20 stone caves. Those were the secret rooms that the group needed to cultivate. When the 18 foreign God Kings stepped into the hall, there were already 7 even more powerful God Kings waiting for them in the discussion hall. Among them, the strongest was a middle-aged man wearing a golden robe and a luxurious divine crown. That person was tall and sturdy. He had a dignified appearance and a golden horn on his forehead. His entire body emitted the aura of a peak expert. Obviously he was a peak god king from the dragon race. If there were any experts from the Starsource continent here, they would definitely recognize that this person was the ruler of the continent, the Gold Source Dragon Emperor. The Gold Source Dragon Emperor sat on a throne inlaid with divine gold and jade. The other 6 god kings stood below the steps in front of the throne. These 6 god kings were even stronger. All of them were high-level god kings. There was even an old man wearing a purple robe with 2 antlers on his head. He was at the 9th level of the god king realm. These god kings came from different races and were all arrogant and unruly. However, they bowed down to the Gold Source Dragon Emperor and were extremely respectful. "Greetings, Dragon Emperor." The 18 god kings stepped into the main hall. They lined up in a row and bowed in unison. The Gold Source Dragon Emperor was expressionless. However, deep in his eyes there was worry and anger. He nodded slightly and said, "Everyone, please dispense with the formalities. Let's talk about the results of this trip." Thus, 6 of the 18 foreign race god kings walked out and reported the news one by one. Reporting to the Dragon Emperor. "We went to the Anlin region to investigate for a few days and found that the Black Heaven sect had been destroyed. Everyone was killed." Reporting to the Dragon Emperor. "Our investigation in the 7 Stops region also yielded the same results. The Qi clan was destroyed half a year ago. Those who were lucky enough to survive have fled the Starsource continent." Reporting to the Dragon Emperor. After the 6 god kings finished reporting, the Gold Source Dragon Emperor frowned deeply. His expression became even more gloomy. "These 6 factions were all my trusted subordinates back in the day. They were the ones I nurtured with great care. Previously, I didn't understand why they didn't respond when I sent them a message after returning. I didn't expect my guess to be right. That damned Myriad Demon Alliance. We should have destroyed them long ago." Chapter 3809. There was no doubt that the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor had returned to the Dragon Realm a month ago. However, he did not descend on the Starsource continent as the people had expected. Instead, he raised his arms and shouted for revenge against the Myriad Demon Alliance. Tens of thousands of people responded and countless experts followed him. That was only a fantasy. It would not happen in reality. Even though he was the overlord of the continent, his prestige had been deeply rooted in the people's hearts for more than 20,000 years. However, the situation had changed. The winds in the Starsource continent had changed as well. Long before the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor's return, the Myriad Demon Alliance had secretly made many arrangements to change the people's hearts and public opinion. They had also gotten rid of many of the mystical Grotto Heaven's hidden tricks. Of course, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor was not a reckless person. When his main body was still in outer space, he had already received news that the mystical Grotto Heaven had been conquered. Therefore, when he rushed back to the Dragon Realm to seek revenge, he had brought back a large group of experts with him. The 24 foreign race godly kings in the main hall were all his trusted subordinates that he had recruited and subdued in outer space. This was especially so for the purple-robed elder with a pair of deer horns on his head. He was the overlord of a certain starfield and had been subdued by the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor through various means. Over the past 900 years, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor had built up a powerful force in outer space. It was not as simple as just sightseeing. Other than these 24 foreign race godly kings, the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor also had a small world in his divine sword. There were thousands of elite godly monarch experts in it. Even though he had such a powerful force, he did not reveal himself after returning to the Starsource continent. He hid on this barren island in the South Sea and first contacted the 6 forces that were most loyal to him. In the end, he waited bitterly for half a month, but there was no reply from the 6 forces. The 18 foreign race godly kings he sent out had gathered a lot of information on the Starsource continent. Most of it was related to the mystical Grotto Heaven and the Myriad Demon Alliance. Through the thousands of pieces of information, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor summarized them and learned about the details of what had happened. At the same time, he also guessed the Myriad Demon Alliance's backup plan. Therefore, he was even more determined to not reveal himself for revenge unless he gathered enough loyal subordinates and a strong enough force. Since there was no reply from the 6 forces, he could only send 18 foreign god kings to the 6 forces personally to investigate and find out the truth. Unfortunately, these 18 godly kings were not familiar with the Star Source continent, so it was inconvenient for them to act. After half a month, they finally completed their mission and returned to the island to report the results. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was in a terrible mood. His chest was filled with surging anger and killing intent that could explode at any moment. The atmosphere in the conference hall became extremely heavy and solemn. The 18 foreign race god kings stood there quietly, not daring to say anything. On the other hand, the 6 upper god kings all revealed expressions of anger, worry, and contemplation. They started to think of a solution for the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. A moment later, a purple-robed old man with antlers stroked his brown beard and asked, "Dragon Emperor, you've ruled the Star Source continent for more than 20,000 years. The forces you've secretly cultivated shouldn't be just those 6, right?" The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor suppressed his anger. He didn't want his subordinates to see his furious side. That was because it meant that he was angry, but he was powerless to do anything about it. It would definitely disappoint his confidants. Of course not. Although the forces and experts under my command have been destroyed by the Myriad Demon Alliance. Even the 6 chess pieces that I buried have been eliminated by the Myriad Demon Alliance. However, I buried 12 chess pieces back then. There are 6 that are hidden even more deeply. All this while, the Star Source continent has been peaceful. Therefore, those chess pieces have not been used. The 6 chess pieces in the open have been removed, but the other 6 chess pieces in the dark should still be there. Hearing this, the deer-horned old man and the 5 upper god kings heaved a sigh of relief. Their brows relaxed. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor didn't say anything else. He rummaged through his interspatial ring for a while before he found 6 unique jade slips of different colors. These 6 jade slips were simple in design and had complicated patterns. They were the communication jade slips that he used to communicate with the 6 hidden chess pieces. The 6 hidden chess pieces only recognized these jade slips. Outsiders didn't know their relationship with the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor entered the messages into the 6 jade slips and sent them out one by one. After doing this, he quietly waited for the 6 hidden chess pieces to reply. The great hall fell into silence. Time passed by silently. After an hour, a purple ray of light descended from the sky. It flew into the great hall and landed in front of the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor took the purple jade slip and used his divine sense to read the information inside. After reading the contents of the jade slip, his expression didn't change. However, a look of relief flashed across his eyes. He also heaved a sigh of relief. The 6 hidden chess pieces were his most loyal and hidden trump cards. If something happened to them, it would be a heavy blow to him. Fortunately, everything seemed to be normal. Not long after, another green ray of divine light flew into the great hall and landed in front of the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. 4 jade slips of different colors flew back one after another. The truth was that the 6 hidden chess pieces had not been discovered by the Myriad Demon Alliance. Moreover, after the Myriad Demon Alliance had taken over the Xuanji Grotto Heaven, they were even more cautious and concealed themselves even more deeply. They had been hiding and conserving their strength, waiting for the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor to return. Now they had finally waited for him. Although the deer-horned elder and the 20 over supreme gods in the Great Hall didn't know the contents of the 6 jade slips, they were still calm. Seeing the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's calm expression and relaxed eyebrows, they knew that it was a good thing. In this way, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor would have more power and they would have a greater chance of helping him take back the Xuanji Grotto Heaven. Of course, there was another important reason. With the 6 hidden chess pieces following them, the tasks of running errands, delivering letters, and gathering information naturally wouldn't fall into the hands of these supreme gods. Among the 20 over supreme gods in the Great Hall, the weakest one was a 5th-level divine king. In the extraterritorial starry sky, they were all experts and overlords who controlled many worlds. They had experienced countless battles and battles. Now that they were in the dragon realm, they had to run errands and do odd jobs. It was a waste of their talents. Pack up and get rid of the traces. Let's go. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor kept the 6 jade slips. He had already made up his mind. He stood up and gave the order. The 24 supreme gods had been waiting for this moment for a month. Naturally, they wouldn't hesitate at all. Everyone immediately spread out to pack up their belongings and get rid of the traces. After another 15 minutes, this temporary cave became worthless. No useful clues were left behind. The supreme gods returned to the Great Hall and gathered in front of the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor led everyone away and flew to the sky above the island. Then he took out a king-grade high-level divine ship which carried everyone to the north. Chapter 38:10. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's divine warship traveled through 6 regions in the south of the continent for several days. The divine warship was fast and stealthy. As such, the spies of the 10,000 Demon Alliance in the south of the continent did not discover this divine warship. 7 days later, the divine warship picked up 6 batches of elites and experts from the 6 regions. These 6 batches of people each had their own characteristics. Some were from prestigious clans, some were from hidden sects, and some were from the pugilistic world. In the eyes of the world, they each had their own backing and did not form a faction. It was impossible to connect them together. However, in reality, they were the 6 hidden chess pieces that the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor had planted back then. Each chess piece kept a low profile and did not reveal their strength. Even the forces that they presented to the world were only the tip of the iceberg. If they displayed their true strength, they would be stronger than the domain chief's manners of the various regions. Now, these 6 hidden chess pieces had responded to the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's summons and gathered in the divine warship to carry out their mission. The 6 powers had a total of 2,000 middle god lords, 1,000 high god lords, 50 low god kings, 30 middle god kings and 6 high god kings. After they entered the divine warship, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's forces more than doubled. It would not be a problem even if they were to fight the 10,000 Demon Alliance head-on. However, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor did not intend to do so. He wanted to head to Sky Crane Mountain first and see what his foundation was like in the Xuanji Grotto heaven. Previously, the foreign race god kings under his command had heard some news. It was said that the 10,000 Demon Alliance's soldiers had retreated to the 10,000 Demon City, leaving only Long Tian to guard the Xuanji Grotto heaven. Everyone knew that Long Tian was waiting for him to fight to the death with him. When he heard this news, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor sneered disdainfully. Now he was going to head to the Xuanji Grotto heaven to fulfill Long Tian's wish. He wanted to see exactly how arrogant this rising star of the younger generation that had only risen to prominence in recent years was to actually dare challenge him, an overlord of the ages. 10 days later, at the peak of Sky Crane Mountain. This 10,000 zhang tall mountain was still in perfect condition. The mountain peak stood tall in the white sea of clouds, and the immortal energy was still faintly discernible. Even the huge stone statue on the mountain peak and the array patterns carved on the ground were not damaged at all. Right above the mountain peak, the huge, bright moon was still hanging in the sky, slowly rotating. However, one could vaguely see that there were 9 crisscrossing shallow marks in the bright moon, flowing slowly like a river. Shua. A divine ship flew over from the south and landed on the peak of Sky Crane Mountain. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, who was wearing a golden robe and a divine crown, was the first to step out of the divine ship and stand at the peak of Sky Crane Mountain. Then the 12 upper god kings and the 48 middle god kings led by the deer-horned elder stepped out of the divine warship and stood behind the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. Everyone followed the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's gaze and looked at the bright moon in the sky. With the eyesight of the 60 divine king powerhouses, they were naturally able to tell that that bright moon was rather strange. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor frowned and smiled coldly. He said, "As I expected, that little bastard really changed the array at the grotto heaven's entrance." The deer-horned elder stared at the bright moon for a while before he said calmly, "It's just a high king-grade divine array. Even if he put in some effort and stacked the array, it can only create some trouble for us. He can't stop the Dragon Emperor. If that's all he has, then I'm going to be disappointed." The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor laughed coldly. He turned around to look at the 60 divine kings behind him and laughed self-mockingly. "It's just to deal with a junior who hasn't made a name for himself yet. How laughable." The deer-horned elder said calmly, "Even an eagle needs to use all its strength to catch a rabbit. That kid is naturally no match for the Dragon Emperor. However, we are only here to prevent him from playing any tricks." The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor did not say anything else. He pointed at the bright moon and ordered, "Break that divine array within a day." The deer-horned elder cupped his hands and said, Understood. Then he led the other divine kings into the sky and spread out around the bright moon. The deer-horned elder was in control of the situation. He observed the great 9 bends of heaven river's array and thought of a way to break it. The 11 high-level god kings and 48 middle-level god kings also used their abilities to study the mysteries of the sealing array. Everyone gathered their thoughts and communicated through voice transmissions. After 15 minutes of discussion, they decided on the direction and method to break the array. The deer-horned elder was still in charge of the situation. He commanded the 11 high-level god kings and 48 middle-level god kings. Under his arrangement, the divine kings lined up in a formation and cast their spells in an orderly and rhythmic manner. They began to work together to break the array. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor stood high in the sky and looked at everything with an indifferent expression. He was thinking about the next step of his plan. As time passed, the process of breaking the array was carried out in an orderly manner. The deer-horned elder was indeed a 9th heaven realm god king. His strength was a level higher than Wuxia and the battle dragon king. Under his leadership, the dozens of divine kings worked together and slowly broke the 9 bends of the heaven river array. Everyone could clearly sense that the 9 bends of the heaven river array on the bright moon was gradually fading and its power was rapidly weakening. However, their speed of breaking the array was still too slow. It was basically impossible to complete it within a day. When it was late at night, more than half of the day's time limit had passed. However, they were only halfway through breaking the array. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was clearly unhappy and he frowned. The deer-horned elder was good at reading people's expressions and he immediately saw that the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was unhappy. He hurriedly flew to the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's side and apologized softly. He explained, "Your Majesty, please forgive us. Some of us are from outside the region and some are from different forces. We are too unfamiliar with each other and we don't have good teamwork. This is why the speed of breaking the array is so slow." The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor glanced at him and sneered, "Stop making excuses. You are afraid that I will be angry and that is why you don't dare to tell the truth. The truth is that Long Tian, that little bastard, has high attainments in the array Dao. Although the array he set up is only a king-grade high-grade divine array, it is not inferior to a supreme-grade divine array." This. The deer-horned elder smiled awkwardly and did not say anything else. There was no other way. "You have already told me the truth. How can I refute you?" The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor said in a low voice. "Do you think that I am such a stubborn and self-opinionated person who refuses to face reality?" The deer-horned elder hurriedly shook his head. "Of course not. Your Majesty, you are broad-minded and far-sighted." The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor waved his hand and said expressionlessly, "There is no need to say anything else. I will personally break the array with you." The deer-horned elder naturally would not refuse. He hurriedly flew back into the sky with the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor and continued to break the array. With the addition of the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, the efficiency of breaking the array was greatly increased and the speed was doubled. Book Guest Residence Reading Website. Chapter 38:11. Finally, at the end of the day, the great formation of 9 bends of Heaven River was broken by the experts. The 9 faint traces of the Milky Way that wrapped around the bright moon had all dissipated. With a crack, a hole was torn open in the great formation of 9 bends of Heaven River. The hole expanded to a radius of 3 zhang. The deer-horned elder and the other god kings worked together to reinforce the hole, preventing it from closing. Then the Gold Source Dragon Emperor led the deer-horned elder and the other god kings through the hole and into the moon. Whoosh! With a flash of white light, the group was swallowed up. In the next instant, the group entered the Xuanji Grotto Heaven and followed the Gold Source Dragon Emperor. The Gold Source Dragon Emperor did not fly very quickly. As he flew through the sky, he scanned the surroundings with his divine sense to observe the situation in the Grotto Heaven. The millstone at the entrance had been destroyed long ago. Everything within a radius of tens of thousands of li had been reduced to ruins. There were still ravines and deep pits on the ground. Even though a year had passed, he could still sense the chaotic aura of divine power lingering in the ruins. In some of the pits and ruins he could still see fragments of the Golden Dragon Guard's armor and weapons. Although the surroundings were empty and abnormally quiet. When the Gold Source Dragon Emperor saw the ruins and the marks on the ground, he could still imagine the tragic scene of the battle. His expression became colder and colder. His eyes also became colder and colder. Anger and killing intent burned in his chest. The deer-horned elder and the other god kings all felt the gold source dragon emperor's anger and killing intent. Their hearts also became heavy. The group flew through the sky and did not conceal their auras at all. They went straight into the depths of the grotto heaven. Along the way, all they saw was shattered earth and messy ruins. Those huge ravines and deep pits seemed to be telling the group how many people had participated in the battle and how tragic it had been. Even the deer-horned elder and the other god kings had not lived in the Xuanji grotto heaven before. They did not recognize the golden dragon guards. However, they still felt heavy, depressed, and angry. As for the owner of the Xuanji grotto heaven, the gold source dragon emperor, he was even more angry. His eyes had turned red. Finally, after an hour, the group stopped above a ruin that was 100,000 li in radius. The ruins were exceptionally messy, and the residual divine power aura was exceptionally dense. The ground was full of deep pits, ravines, and yellow sand, indicating that this was the main battlefield of the great battle. The silent gold origin dragon emperor could no longer suppress the grief and anger in his heart. He roared to the sky, "Long Tune, Myriad Demon Alliance. This emperor will tear all of you to shreds and grind your bones to dust." His angry roar reverberated between heaven and earth, causing everyone's eardrums to hurt. However, everyone could empathize with the gold origin dragon emperor's feelings. They could also guess that the gold origin dragon emperor's divine palace was once located in these ruins. As expected, the golden origin dragon emperor pointed to the ruins and said to the god kings beside him, "There was once a mountain range here called the Golden Dragon Mountain Range. It is a super divine range that I have spent several years refining by gathering thousands of mountain ranges. It was majestic, holy, and domineering. Moreover, it was able to gather the divine power of the entire grotto heaven. It was one of the top cultivation holy lands in the world. On this Golden Dragon Mountain Range, the soldiers and craftsmen under my command spent hundreds of years building thousands of palaces, buildings, and mansions. This place had the most dazzling divine palace, the most hidden and sturdy secret rooms, the most elegant scenery, and the most beautiful buildings and gardens. Now those bastards from the Myriad Demon Alliance have destroyed everything." The gold origin dragon emperor's tone was low, and his face was contorted in pain. Everyone could feel how angry and heartbroken he was, and how much he hated the Myriad Demon Alliance. The deer-horned elder nodded slightly and said solemnly, "Your Majesty, don't worry. Those traitors from the Myriad Demon Alliance will definitely be punished by the heavens for committing such a heinous act." Without a doubt, these words had elevated the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor to the heavens and labeled the Myriad Demon Alliance as traitors and traitors. The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor calmed down a lot, but he still gritted his teeth and roared, "No. This emperor will grind their bones to dust before they are punished by the heavens." Another high-level god king hurriedly bowed and said, "We will definitely do our best to fulfill His Majesty's wish." The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor stopped venting his anger and waved his hand. He ordered, "Split into 6 teams and search the entire Xuanji Grotto. Find Long Tian." The deer-horned elder quickly made arrangements. He split the 59 high-level god kings into 6 teams and sent them to search in different directions. After the 6 teams left, the deer-horned elder stayed behind to accompany the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor. There was no one else beside him except for his trusted aide, the deer-horned elder. The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor sighed and said, "Although it is inevitable that one's home will be destroyed in the flames of war. However, that bastard Long Tian is still too vicious. He actually destroyed the divine palace that this emperor had painstakingly built. Even if this emperor destroys the Myriad Demon Alliance and takes back the Xuanji Grotto, it will take me hundreds of years to restore it to its former glory." The deer-horned elder bowed slightly and comforted, "Your Majesty, don't worry. When you regain control of the Starsource continent, countless skilled craftsmen will be willing to rebuild the divine palace for you. Moreover, the Myriad Demon Alliance only appeared after you ruled the continent for more than 20,000 years. After this incident, there will be no other force that dares to challenge your authority in the next 10,000 years. No matter how strong or arrogant a force is, the Myriad Demon Alliance's outcome is the best example." These words touched the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor's heart. He indeed calmed down a lot. After that, the two of them talked about some miscellaneous matters and plans for the future. Unknowingly, a day passed just like that. The 6 teams that were searching for Ji Tianxing also returned to the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor and reported the results of their search. Your Majesty, we were unable to find any traces of Long Tian. Your Majesty, we were unable to find anything in the areas we were in charge of. Your Majesty, the 6 teams were in charge of different areas. They searched the entire Xuanji Grotto within a day. Unfortunately, they all received the same results. They were unable to find Long Tian. The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor immediately frowned and asked with a gloomy face, Long Tian is not in the Xuanji Grotto? Was the news you received earlier fake? An upper-level god king quickly nodded and took the opportunity to flatter the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor. Your Majesty, you are right. Who is Long Tian? Why would he dare to wait here alone for your Majesty's return? In my opinion, he must have purposely released fake news to mislead the people. In reality, he has already left the Xuanji Grotto and hid in the Myriad Demon City. The deer-horned elder pondered for a moment and shook his head. The news might not be fake. Long Tian's strength is not ordinary. Even if he secretly left the Xuanji Grotto, no one would know. Temporarily left? The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor raised his eyebrows and sneered. Then we will wait here for him to come back and die.